Welcome, welcome, one and all, to Funkatopia Live. I am your host, Mr. Christopher, with my illustrious co-host, Mr. Jeff Page.
What's up, everybody?
Are you going to be okay with that?
Welcome to Funkatopia.
Are you going to be okay with that, like, for the rest of your career?
Man,
here
for the rest of my life, fur is going to be my thing. I'm going to fur until I can't fur anymore. You wait till our guest gets on, and she's going to get furnt also.
yeah, of course. And I don't blame you. I'm going to switch places because you got that fancy design in the back. Yeah, we are going to have an amazing time tonight. We obviously do a little bit of a pre-show to kind of welcome you guys in, talk a little bit about some of the goings on in the in the music world today, which we really have a whole bunch to talk about because I have been so consumed with Susan Rogers' book, and I've just been this book is friggin' amazing. For those who unfortunately I have a green screen thing, so it's, I guess there must be some green on the on the book that's like breaking it out, but this is what it sounds like. I can actually show you guys a copy of the book. There it is. That's the copy of the book. You absolutely have to get this. It is really a fantastic book. Definitely check it out. We're going to be talking to her about this book as well. And so one of the reasons why we do this little bit of a pre-show is to kind of give you guys an opportunity to be able to come in and hang out, and also just get everybody situated, because we'll start the show right at 8 o'clock. Dr. Susan Rogers is already in the green room, which I'm so excited about, because
she's here already. I love that when that happens. Let me just say, when you guys get the book, because we know a lot of you are going to get it during this program, at some point you're going to buy this book. The first thing you want to do is listen to it before you even open it, because the book is called "This Is What It Sounds Like." So just listen to the book for a minute, then start reading.
I meant to add this question. I thought about this question when I was looking at the book. I thought about this like a few times, wondering if the title came from Prince's song "This Is What It Feels Like." What? Because every time I read that title, that's the flow that I think of, and I was just like, it's probably not. Not everything is about Prince, Chris. But anyways, it is a really fantastic book. The other cool thing about it, and we actually have the Amazon link, and on top of that, we'll go ahead and share the Amazon link so that we're just kind of prep you guys up. Because we are going to bring her in here in just a minute. I'm going to copy this. This is the Amazon link, but also just to make you guys' life a little bit easier, I'm going to put this in here. I also set up a page at funkatopia.com/Susan, so that you guys don't have to memorize the Amazon link. You can just go to funkatopia.com/Susan, and the link's right there. It's just a picture of the book and then the link. But of course, once this interview is done, we'll also post up the interview on that page as well, and maybe some other stuff on that page. So if you are listening on the Funked Up app, which, hey, I remembered to start the Funked Up app, right? Starting the pre-show. We have folks from all over the world listening right now via the Funked Up app on the Purple Yoda radio. Our online radio station. We also have it on the phone as well. It's ASCAP licensed, so you can actually not feel guilty about listening to the music. So it is an amazing time. And of course, right now we're broadcasting live over the Funked Up app. So I'm sorry if we're interrupting your night of listening to music. Maybe you wanted to chill or whatever, but I'm guarantee you're going to have an amazing time tonight, because one of the things that we wanted to really get into tonight was, I spent a lot of time listening to a lot of interviews with Dr. Rogers over the years. And I wanted to try to do my absolute best to ask some questions that have not been asked before. And that was really difficult, because I think she has been asked everything under the sun. But luckily, this new book has given me a lot of new material, and we're going to talk a little bit about. Obviously, we're going to be talking about a lot of Prince tonight, but we're also going to be talking about the neuroscience of music, and some of the things that she addresses in her new book. And I want to talk about all those things that we were talking about before we even went on the air. You were talking about the frequencies and
all that stuff. I mean, we get some in-depth conversations, and it's going to be fun because of all the conversations we've had with other artists, other musicians that we've dealt with over the years. So this will be great to get all those things out. And let me just mention real quick, for those of you on Facebook who are watching on Facebook, we are aware, in case you aren't, that there is an issue with comments. So we're not seeing the comments in the feed right now at this time, so we're not able to necessarily respond. And those of you that can switch over to YouTube, you may want to, because I'm sure you have a lot to say as well. And but we're not able to respond to anything in Facebook at the moment, just until they fix it. We don't know what the issue is. So
yeah, but it doesn't have anything. It's not us. It's a Facebook thing right now, right?
Well, it looks like it is a Facebook thing, because I went to the page directly and I couldn't even see any comments or pull anything up. So who knows what the problem is.
And I actually do see some comments that are popping up on Facebook right now.
You are getting them now?
So, well, okay. I'm seeing them on here, so we'll see what comes through. But just have patience. If you guys want to switch over from Facebook to YouTube, once Facebook fixes their little issue here, almost 23,000 followers on Facebook. So it's going to be quite a few of you that are going to switch over to YouTube if you want to chat. I did actually take some pre-questions. We did a post and we said, some specific questions that you wanted to ask Susan, go ahead and put them up there. So we've kind of integrated them into the night. But I also expect that there's going to be some activity here as well. So all I'm seeing is YouTube comments as far as StreamYard is concerned, but that's okay. It's all good.
I'm so excited.
Man, yeah. So basically, I think what you may have to do, Jeff, if you can keep an eye on the Facebook page, like on a separate tab or whatever, and just make sure we're not losing any type of important
information. I'm trying to pop over and get it to come up with comments on mine. I can't even get them. So let me play a little bit. I'm going to mute myself just for a second so you don't hear the feed come back through.
Yeah, he's going to get, sometimes when he gets frustrated, he curses a lot. So we have to mute him out. And we got to keep it kid friendly. But again, yes, tonight we're going to be spending some time with the amazing, legendary Dr. Susan Rogers. And she's already in the green room. So I'm going to be bringing her in here in just 1 second, because I want to make sure that you see what Jeff Page has got going on. But yes, if you guys want to go ahead and chat and participate in the chat, you might want to switch over to YouTube, youtube.com/Funkatopia. Again, if you are listening on the Funked Up app, enjoy yourselves. There's nothing that you have to worry about, because there's no chat functionality that will feed over here. So you're all good. What's up?
The Funkatopia app, we've decided, is our guilt-free radio because of the fact that it's ASCAP licensed. So guilt-free radio right there. So
that should be our new slogan. Guilt-free radio.
For real.
But since all you fine folks are in here from YouTube and everybody's hanging out, and which I know that a lot of people are bummed out because most of these people are Facebook folks. I mean, so many of our fans are on Facebook. So hopefully they'll be able to figure that out, because that's a bummer. But that's okay. Maybe, possibly. I'll see if I can disconnect, and then I'll see if I can disconnect and reconnect on Facebook, and maybe that will cause it.
Well, from when I checked our StreamYard thing, there was a post that popped up and said they reached out to Facebook. So I don't think it's our direct connection. It was a very specific thing. But either way, we're doing the best. I'm watching the tabs. I'm trying to keep an eye out for you guys, looking for your comments. And we'll just move on. The show must go on, and we're going to have a great time anyway. I'm still excited. I'm trying to be calm. It's so
yeah, I am too. But I also want to try to get some people in here as well from that. So let me see if I can disconnect Facebook here real quick, because I just want to see if we can reconnect here, and maybe that'll work. Let's do this for it. Yeah. So let's just see what happens. Yeah. It's reconnecting to Facebook right now. So hopefully everything will work, because I mean, what's to lose?
Exactly. Exactly. It's worth a shot.
Yeah, so we just disconnected everybody from Facebook. So please, everybody from Facebook, reconnect, and we'll take care of you. But for right now, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, but we're going to go ahead and bring Dr. Susan Rogers in right now, just a couple minutes early. Just a couple minutes early. You're going to say, all right. Everybody, welcome. There she is, Dr. Susan Rogers. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to see you, Mr. Christopher and Jeff.
Nice to see you.
it's been absolutely, I'm so glad that we actually got you on the show because we have so many questions that we want to ask you. And there's just, I mean, it's a laundry list of I can't even begin.
Good,
I don't really even know where to start. So again, it's fantastic to have you on board, and hopefully, we can just actually, you know what? It's not even 8 o'clock, but we're going to do it anyways. We're just going to go ahead and go right into it because I can't even imagine what wasting time with you looks like. So,
right.
I'm sure you have an opener and there are things that you want to ask, but you had mentioned that you had heard a lot of interviews that I've done, and I've told a lot of the same Prince stories a few times, but I thought of one today. It's a tiny little story, but I don't think I've ever shared it before. So I saved it. It just popped into my head today, and I thought I'm going to tell these guys. So we were in Los Angeles, this would have been the mid 80s. And I was waiting for him at the studio at Sunset Sound. And I got a phone call from Gilbert Davison, who Gilbert was his a driver, a valet, a friend. Anyway, Gilbert called and he said, our car is broken down. They were a few miles down the road. He said, our car is broken down. Prince is standing out here on the street, somewhere on Melrose or something like that. He's standing out here on the street. Just come down here and pick us up. And I said, yep, be right there. And I drove my car down. Another car I had in Los Angeles was some little rental car. And of course, it would be a little economy car because why does an engineer need an expensive car? I was just going from the hotel to the studio and back. So his management got me a cheap car. So I went and there, right in Hollywood. I still remember, I don't remember exactly what street it was, but I remember it was mid-afternoon and standing under a shady tree next to the broken car was Prince. And he just looked like he was just kind of fuming, but he was standing there rather than waiting in the car. He's standing out in public, standing against the car, and Gilbert was there. And I picked them up. They got in my little car and, and we're driving back to the studio. And this little car I had was just kind of a little poo box. It just was a cheap little car. And Gilbert was sitting in the front and Prince was in the back. And Prince only said one sentence: tell them to get you a better car next time.
How long did it take him to get you a better car?
Oh, I didn't even ask. It's just one of those things he says, like he said to me and Peggy McCreary once, you guys work for me. Why don't you dress better? We were in jeans and sweatshirts. We're recording engineers. You work for me. Why don't you dress better? And Peggy and I looked at each other and we looked at him like, you think you give us time to go shopping?
Right. Yeah.
Seems like that starts with pitch. That
absolutely positively does not make any sense. And, but it is what it is. I can't imagine what, I think one of the questions is, regarding how much you actually got paid, not specific dollar amount, but I think it was somebody was asking how you got paid. So we'll get
fair question.
Yeah. So here is what I have. I want to make sure that we introduce you properly. We have a very special guest tonight, as you can see, and she opened with a unheard story before, so that's fantastic. I am obviously, as you can tell, I'm beyond excited to have here. She is a literal legend behind the board in a variety of different ways. And she has proved without a doubt that women in the production arena of the music industry are without a doubt a force to be reckoned with. And she was completely at the helm for Prince's biggest selling albums and then some, serving as Prince's engineer from 1983 to 1987 and working in whole or in part on, Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day, Parade, Sign of the Times. There's also The Flesh in there, Apollonia 6, The Family, the Madhouse albums, Jill Jones, Andre Simone's AC, Sheila E. and Romance 1600, Sue Ann's Blue Velvet, Maserati 100 miles per hour, Eric Leeds Times Square, Candy Dulfer's Sexuality, Jesse Johnson's Every Shade of Love, Tevin Campbell's Tevin, Mavis Staples' The Voice, Wendy and Lisa's albums, Sheena Easton's Lover and Me. I mean, just, and obviously probably hundreds of hours of stuff that is still buried in the vault. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, you better put your hands together for the legend and icon, Dr. Susan Rogers.
Hey, everybody. That's pretty good, Jeff. I gotta ask you about those little later on. Ask you about those guitars you've got behind you. I'm
Oh yeah,
intrigued.
absolutely, absolutely. My
Yeah,
my
I
my
mean,
my toys, my pride and joys. Some of them.
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. So I have to ask, I mean, obviously I can't thank you enough for being on the show, but it amazes me that you were such, a humble human being considering your amazing accomplishments. Um, do you not grasp the immense impact that you had on the industry and how most Prince fans hold you in so revered? I mean, how do you stay down to earth?
I don't grasp that, I don't. I think I'm very typical of a lot of engineers. You get into it because you love the work, and you get an opportunity to do the work, and it makes you so happy. You're so grateful that people give you the opportunity. They hire you, and you get to be in this business, and you get to serve music and do the things you love. And I think the thinking about it stops there. For me, and I think for a lot of people too. Beyond that, you don't think about it. It's funny, but you meet some of these great, great record producers, really legendary folks. They are some of the most humble people you'll ever want to know. They're humble because they know how hard this is. This business is really tough, and you know how many disappointments and failures there are. It's the arts. There's a lot of failure. So
Mhm.
it's that failure that keeps you recognizing, don't get too high over the highs, don't get too low over the lows. Just cruise right there in the middle. And you'll have a long career. You'll have a good time as well. So I do feel the love from Prince fans, and that's like that's just like one pilot light recognizing another. I loved Prince too. I was a Prince fan when I joined him, and I know what that love for Prince feels like. So I try to keep their pilot lights lit with my own.
Absolutely, I love that. When was it that you actually realized that people were noticing you and your work with him?
Well, there'd be the occasional thing here and there, on tour. Sometimes people would seek me out and they'd want to say hello, but that was pretty rare. I think it was later, much much later, in the 2000s when I started getting asked occasionally to do interviews, and I would always say yes. I still always say yes because I admire and respect Prince so much that I wanna keep his name alive, I wanna keep his memory alive. Anything I can do to help circulate stories about him, memories of him, keeping his legend out there, of course I'm gonna do.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, and I mentioned this at the top, you really kicked open the doors for women in this industry. I know that, people like Peggy were, are already doing, and there was a lot of other ones that are out, but I think you really, I mean, with Prince and the whole Purple Rain, I mean, it was just so out there in front. I mean, do you feel that women in this industry, is it getting better or about the same in regards to the numbers of engineers out there?
Here's the problem with women in the industry, and thank you for saying that. I know that I was a pioneer along with several others, but there weren't that many of us. So, yeah, so the problem is a lot of women are interested in having careers in the recording studio, and they have the capacity to do it. They study and they work hard, and they practice and they get in the studio. But there's one problem for all of us women, and it's a really tough one to solve, and that's the fact that it takes so long to finally get a purchase on this career. You have to realistically work for at least 10 years nonstop pretty much before you finally are established and people know who you are and you now have a toehold and now you can start building your career. You're gonna be in your mid-30s when that happens, and that's just the age where you have to, if you're a woman, decide whether or not you're gonna have kids. Men don't have that same problem, but women do, and having children is, far more physically and psychologically taxing on a woman than a man. So we do see a lot of women get off to the exact same start as their male counterparts, and what happens is just when their careers are starting to blossom, that's when they decide, no, I got to take this fork in the road. Oh, it sounds like that Yogi Berra quote. If you see a fork in the road, take it. I got to go this way in this fork in the road. I want to have kids. And what they think to themselves is, and then after I have kids and the kids are a couple of years old, I'll get back into it. But that's really hard to do. Really hard to do.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the decisions that you have to make. I mean, I think what ends up happening with again with women in general, it's like you have to, you know, in many cases, derail your career in order to have a family and to kind of focus on things, and you know, that's one, I would say, disadvantage in that particular aspect, as you were just mentioning. But
Yeah,
I mean,
hard choice.
yeah, that's yeah, but those are just some warm up questions here. So I want to get into some specific things now, because, and for those that don't know, we are speaking with Dr. Susan Rogers, obviously the recording engineer for Prince from 1983 to 1987. She has a new book out now, and I'll hold it up. But the problem is that obviously I have a green screen behind me. So the problem is, and I'll make myself a little bit larger. The problem is that it's picking up some of the green on this book, but it is, that's kind of funky, actually.
Looks so cool.
Yeah, but I will, I'm actually going to put up a picture of the book right here so you guys can see it. The book is called This Is What It Sounds Like and What the Music You Love Says About You. We're going to talk about this. And it's written by yourself and Ogi Ogas. Is that, can you tell me a little bit about Ogi?
Yeah, so in 2019, I was interviewed by Ogi for a book that he wrote with a fellow named Todd Rose, and the book was called Dark Horse. It's a really, really wonderful book. It's a book about people who've won a certain kind of race, a certain kind of cultural race, unexpectedly. Someone who came from out of left field and managed to achieve a lot, and I was honored to be included in that book. So after we talked for many, many hours, Ogi came up to me afterward and he said, "This is what I do. I'm a professional co-author, and how would you like to write a book about music?" And I said, "Well, my students know more about music than I do. I can't. I'm not a musician, but what I can write about is music listening. That's what I've been doing my whole life. From the time I was a child, I was obsessed with records, not with being a musician and playing music or writing it or singing it or performing it. I loved records, which might suggest that, okay, well, you'll have a career as a DJ maybe, or maybe a record executive or a manager, but I wanted to serve music in the recording studio. So anyway, I spent my time as a listener, as a record maker. Then when I got my PhD, I studied the science of listening. And then as a teacher, I'm helping students to realize their dreams in the music business. So music listening is my musicality. My relationship with music, like most people's, is that of the listener. I'm on input as a listener. We all are, whereas the music creators are on output. There's a big role for us out there.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a lot about the book here, because I have so many questions that I've always wanted to ask, and Jeff Page did also. But for those who are interested in the book, absolutely pick it up. It's fantastic. It is a great read. You can check it out at funkatopia.com/Susan. That's FUNKATOPIA.com/Susan. And you'll be able to find the link there to purchase it on Amazon. Please make sure you pick it up. Hardcover is awesome, but they also have it available on Kindle as well. And of course, you know, you can probably get it at your local bookstore as well. And when we're done with this, I'll place this video up on that page. So if you miss anything, that's going to be fantastic. Also, what I found really cool about this book is that there is an accompanying website called thisiswhatitsoundslike.com, where there are specific songs that you can listen to that accompany the text in the book. So, you know, you have the reader stop and then listen to a song, and then you share observations about that song, which I love. I just love that concept. And I always said that if I wrote a book, I would have to do it this way, because where there are accompanying songs and playlists, mainly because, and I don't know if you're like this or not, but I am horrible with dates and times. I know some people can just, our good friend that just passed, Wally Safford, we're going to talk about him for a second in a bit, but he is like one of these guys where you say, what were you doing on January 3rd, 1984?
Oh.
Like, oh, we were here, da, 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 da. We went here, and then he was driving a black Ford, and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm not like that. I mean, even down to the year, sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge, but if you can tell me what song was playing on the radio, I can tell you exactly where I was living, the friends I had, I mean, down to minute details. And I feel horrible about it because, I mean, I just think it's so disrespectful to not recall details like that. But during your studies, have you found that this is common for a lot of people? I hope I'm not alone.
Yeah, music processing is a funny thing, and as art forms it kind of stands out a little bit. So when we process music, when we're listening to music, our brains can attend to many different features of it. So your auditory signal, it's coming up from your cochlea and it's coming up through the auditory brainstem and it's going up, it's kind of terminating right here above your ears. But what ends up happening is once that auditory signal gets up there, you can independently focus on the lyrics. You can focus on the groove. You can focus on just the sounds. You can focus on the melody or the harmony. You can focus on the style of the record. You can focus on just the overall package of the record. So there's a lot of different regions of your brain that can attend to and enjoy that record. That means music listening is really easy for us to encode as a memory. Now, when it's encoding as a memory, other neural patterns are going to hitch a ride onto that. So in your case, when you were encoding the actual neural pattern that corresponded to the song, you were also encoding the people you were with, the places you were with. Mm-hmm. You were encoding the actual external stimuli in your life, and you linked those two together. So memories of the one will often trigger memories of the other. In my case, in the case of a lot of other people, when you're listening to a song and you're processing it deeply, what I do, and I've always done since I was a little kid, is I picture the musicians in the studio. It's my automatic go-to visualization. I love imagining that I'm right there while they are performing that record. It's my favorite fantasy. So likewise, when I hear a record that I haven't heard in a long time, bammo, my brain is going to call up those same visualizations, those same fantasies that I enjoyed, my mental treat that I enjoyed while I was listening to the record. It's an automatic process.
Wow, that's funny because for me, I can usually tell how I felt when I first heard a song, like what I was feeling. But after that, what ends up happening is every small nuance of the song, whether if it's musically, the little side note, the extra ding that might have been there, vocally, some extra run or riff or something, almost to where people think there's something wrong with me because if a song comes on, I'm hearing and remembering those little things that were not the actual song. They were just snuck in there in the engineering. But as far as who was with me, what else was going on in my life, not so much. It's just all the minute, smallest details of the song. That's what sticks with me.
It's so interesting to me, this whole individualization, individualization of music processing. So a record is a record is a record. We could play something right now, and acoustically speaking, we'd all be hearing the same thing. But the magic happens when it goes up into our brains, and that's where we're each hearing a different record. We're each experiencing something different. I have a friend, a great guitar player named Craig Northey from the band Odds, and he's a wonderful musician. And Craig told me when he was a kid and he listened to records, he always imagined how that record could be better. Like what guitar part could they have added? What else could they have done to make this record better? And as he was describing that to me, I just looked at him and I thought, I've never had that thought. we're all such, we were both little kids right around the same time. He's listening to music and thinking, now you know what they could have done. I'm listening to music and I'm picturing the performers in the studio and I'm just lost in a trance. I became a record maker to make my fantasies come true. He became a successful musician to make his fantasies come true.
Yeah, so he was a lot more analytical about not only his work, but other people's work as well.
Yeah, analytical about, oh, I want to participate. That's what these guys are doing. But, if I had a guitar in my hands, what could I be doing? How could I contribute? I believe in my heart of hearts that little children know who they are. I think little children have a good sense of what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they like and what they dislike. I think adults try to get in there and shape and mold that. But I think if you leave kids alone, they can kind of tell you what they're cut out for. And I think Craig was certainly cut out to be a musician. I've heard similar stories from other musician friends of what record listening was like for them when they were little. It's different. It was different than it was for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, everybody, just between Jeff Page and myself, we were thinking, there's obviously different approaches that we have with listening to music and what we connect to. But, to kind of talk a little bit about albums in general, talking about some specifics. I know some Prince fans are losing their minds out there. Prince was at his artistic peak in the window of time that you worked there. I mean, and obviously before that as well. I mean, with 1999 and all that, I mean, you and Controversy and Dirty Mind. And I mean, you were obviously a fan before you even got involved with him. But I mean, working on Purple Rain may have been considered lightning at a bottle to many. But then you did it again with Around the World in a Day. And then you did it again with Parade. And then you did it again with Sign of the Times, which many consider to be his best album. And I think you already answered the question about, did you ever let that, go to your head? But one thing I was curious about, I had Morris Hayes on the show, and he literally said that the whole time that he was playing with Prince, he always felt like he was in way over his head. like he was just like, he was called out, and I can't imagine performing under that mental duress that's going on in your head, but he felt that way the entire time he was working with Prince. Did you ever feel that way? Like you were just kind of, he's not going to be happy with what's going on here. I feel like you're like overwhelmed.
Oh yeah. Morris is so honest. That's, I think I would be willing to bet that every single musician who's ever played with Prince has had that feeling. Like, how am I going to keep up? I can tell you when I joined Prince in 83, and I'm sure this was the case before and it was the case after I left, that train that he was driving moved really fast. I don't just mean that the days went really quickly and that we worked really hard. His ideas came so fast. He was churning out albums at a ridiculous pace.
Yeah.
So every single one of us who were simply mere mortals realized I'm on this train and it's flying and we can't stop. We can't stop. We have to, whatever it is we're doing, we have to keep up with his pace. So you're always feeling like this thing is going faster than what you can manage. But for me, and I'll bet it was true for his musicians and other folks as well, you got your pride. It's pride. And your pride tells you, if he can do it, I'm going to do it. And I have a fraction of the decisions to make that he has to make. I have a fraction of the responsibility, a fraction of the pressure. If he can do it at that level, I can surely handle my gig. And yeah, you work really hard, but I think this is one of the reasons why so many people who worked for him were so humble, because you realized you were, as hard as you were working and all the great things you were doing, you were just still beneath his level of accomplishment, for sure.
Right. Wow. So with that, throughout your, how should I say, tour of duty, it's a different scenario for you as opposed to the musicians, being the engineer. And so how often, and this is again back to the, like you said, Mars Day, being very honest, how often did you really just want to like throw your hands up in the air, like the big sigh, I give up, only to regroup, and then as usual,
Oh,
in your style would be Susan Rogers style, knock it out the park, because you had to regroup yourself. I don't can't imagine you have someone to take you off the ledge.
yeah, I snapped once. I snapped once, and,
We got to
uh
hear that.
yeah. Oh, we were again at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles, and, God, I'd just been working so, so hard, and fortunately for me, he just happened to be in a really good mood that day, but we're in the studio, and there was someone else, another musician was there. It might have been Sheila, it might have been someone else, but I was trying to do something for him as fast as possible, and I mispatched something. I did something wrong and pressed the wrong button, and he started teasing me, and he decided that, what he would do, this would be a good idea. He was gonna find me, just like he fined his musicians on stage, like James Brown did. You know, if you hit a wrong note, you make a mistake, Prince would turn and point to you, and that's a $50 fine. I don't know if he ever collected on those things or not. His musicians could tell you, but he suddenly decided, well, it'd be a good idea to fine his engineers as well. So I made some mistake, and he said, "Susan, what I'm gonna start doing, I'm gonna start fining you every time you make a mistake. That's $50 right there." And I just snapped. And I grabbed my purse and I said, "You want money from me? You have my whole entire life. You have my entire life. We are joined at the hip 24/7. I am on call every single minute of every single day, and I have been for years. I don't get any sleep. I don't have a personal life. I haven't seen my family. I haven't been on a date. Now you want my money too? You could have my money." And he was sitting in a chair and I was standing over him, and I opened up my wallet and I took out whatever cash I had and I threw it at him. And I just threw it at him right in his lap.
My God.
And I just said, there's my money. Now you have everything. You have everything of me." I
I
turned
just
around
see
and I
tears.
walked out of the room, and I'm walking out of the room thinking, "Oh, oh, oh, I probably just lost my job. Oh,"
No.
but I took 5 minutes in the bathroom to just be quiet, just calm down. And I came back in, and I seem to remember, the details are vague on this part. I think the money had been gathered up, neatness had been restored, and we just resumed. I didn't s I didn't snap very often. That was the one time I snapped, and he knew that there were so many times when I was right on the edge and didn't fall off that cliff. I kept it cool. I maybe had to go out and take 5 minutes and take a little breather, but I was always cool. I always kept it together. So when he saw me snap, he knew, okay, that maybe was the wrong thing at the wrong time. He let it go. He let it go.
Um,
I'm thankful that he did.
Wow.
yeah, well, I think everybody has those moments. I mean, you have them in relationships, you have them, and yeah, I mean, but I can't imagine, putting in those types of hours with somebody and then having them, kind of seem ingrateful in a way for your efforts and just, it's yeah, that causes any person to snap. You don't have to be a neuroscientist to know that.
Yeah, and I idolized him. If he said we need to work 48 hours, we need to work 48 hours. Then that I believed him. The things that he said, the things that he asked for, I believed that they were necessary. I suppose I still do. He's saying, "Here's what you need to do to help this train keep going at this pace." And I never questioned it. Never, never questioned it. The whole time I was with him, whatever needed to be done, I'm doing it. I had the greatest job in the world as far as I was concerned, and I so admired him and his talent and what we were putting out there in the world. Of course, I'm going to contribute. I remember him saying, he would say things like, he came downstairs. We were at home in Minnesota. He came downstairs to the home studio. This was the studio when he lived on Galpin Road in Chanhassen. And he said, "Last night while I was asleep, we sold 750,000 records." So, records would come out on Tuesday like movies. So this must have been a Wednesday morning. Overnight, the record had sold 750,000 just overnight. I remember him saying that. He didn't reflect on those sorts of things very often, but when he did, you recognized the awe and the pride that he had in, yeah, I just sold 750,000 records overnight. And for the youth of today who might be tuning in, that was when you had to go to a store and buy a record. You don't stream it.
Right.
You
You have
get
work
to the
for that
store,
record.
you put your money down, and you buy that record, and you take it out the door. So that happened 750,000 times overnight, which
That's
is amazing.
yeah, it is definitely amazing, and I remember those days. I don't necessarily miss those days. I like the fact that you can order something and have it brought to you, but yeah, I we all remember those days for sure. But talking about being able to trust him when he would say something and you would just do it. I mean, are there recordings that you can think of that you were involved in that maybe had some? This is kind of like one of those. Uh, we were talked a little bit about binaural beats, but not really nothing necessarily like that. But is there something that you were involved in recording that had some very inconspicuous pieces that you think most people miss, like maybe possibly some subliminal stuff, or even an unusual sample that was kind of tucked away in the mix, hidden somewhere that you can recall that you're thinking, why is he doing this? And then,
Mm, no, if he put it on record, he wanted you to hear it. So he would
Mm.
put those, kinda cryptic messages. Sometimes he'd speak into his guitar pickups. "This isn't really Maserati, this is Prince." He says that on a Maserati record. He was doing a we were doing a song to give to Mark Brown's band, Maserati, and we had just finished recording it, and he had his guitar in his lap, and he picked up the guitar, and he spoke into the pickups because the pickups, of course, it's just a magnet and a coil. It's like a microphone, so he speaks into it, and he says, "This isn't Maserati, this is really Prince." So he'd do little things like that, but, I think he wanted you to find those things. He wouldn't hide anything.
yeah, I don't think I've heard that. I don't know what song it is. I don't think I've
I
heard
don't
that story
remember.
before. Wow.
That is amazing. I've never heard that or noticed that. Uh, well, when you were working with him, I know many times you've mentioned when it was time for vocals, he had everyone leave the room. So he would handle all of that on his own and then come back in and finish whatever you needed to do. But when that happened, did he ever sneak anything in there after the fact? Now, what I mean here is, um, did he ever decide there's an instrument or some extra music that when you came back and you went, oh, I don't remember that. Get that piece in there. Not sneaking from the listeners, but something an afterthought that he had while you were out of the room and come back in, or really he stayed with just vocals.
It was just vocals. So the vocals, would go on before the record was done, of course, he didn't wait until all the overdubs were done, so, usually, it would come at a time after we did the basic rhythm track, bass and drums, you have the chord changes and the melody in there, and once you had a good, strong skeleton, that's when he would do his lead and all his backing vocals, and then that's the time he would start to open up and talk a little bit more. So I'd come back into the room, vocals are now done. Now we can blast it through the speakers, and now we can do the fun part, which is the ornamentation. Now we can do all the bells and whistles and the things that turn a song into a record. We can add the finishing touches or any effects or just anything. At that point is when a record's going to turn the corner. And for him, it's gonna turn the corner and either end up on his next album or someone's next album, or it's gonna go into that vault. So that's kind of the critical stage when at this point, now as you're putting on the ornamentation, now you can hear what this is. Now you really know for sure where this record stands and whether or not it's worthy of your next, album, or sometimes it's more than worthy. It's brilliant, but it just doesn't fit with the theme of the next record. So Prince used to say throughout his career, he said, "We don't make singles, we make albums." I have never known a successful artist who was less concerned with singles. He really paid so little attention to that. When we were in the studio, we were making albums. That was his joy. That's what he lived for. He was an album maker. In the days of vinyl, of course, it's 34 minutes long. You got 17 minutes on one side and 17 on the other side, and that's your album, a 34-minute piece of music. So he loved sequencing albums. I loved doing that with him too. That was really, really fun, is when you're putting the songs in order, and you're finally listening to side A and side B, and you're getting the experience of the listener, and you're imagining, what are they going to think? What's it going to feel like? They're going to start with side A, and put on the first song, and it's going to play through, then they're going to flip it over, and they're going to play the B side. What's this experience going to be like?
Yeah.
That was such a joy to do with him.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Let's go ahead, Jeff.
Well, you mentioned as far as making albums versus focusing on singles. So, and how many artists, whether they're, single oriented or album oriented. And now you made me think something, knowing that you've worked with so many people since, and, everything that you've done, the numerous times in your interviews, you've shared how spoiled you become. With any engineer had become with working with Prince, considering he'll tear through a song, and you didn't have to do take after take after take. He kind of just, something came out and it just was right. And in your interviews, you talk about with other artists needing to wait all day for someone to get a part right and things like that, and how that could be frustrating. So I'm curious as to what is there, because I'm sure you've enjoyed many of the artists, but is there any particular artist that you really enjoyed that was kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, for different reasons. It was amazing working with David Byrne for his creativity and his methodology. David knows how to make records, and that was a wonderful experience. Working with Bare Naked Ladies was incredible because the guys were so smart and so funny and really good musicians. These guys can really play. Anything you suggest to them, they'll do. But the one that stands out the most to me in terms of overall what I gained from it would have to be Geggy Tah. So Geggy Tah were a duo. The Tah was Tommy Jordan, and the Geg was the great producer Greg Kurstin. You've probably heard of Greg Kurstin. He's produced Adele and Foo Fighters and Beck and Paul McCartney, and he's having great success these days as a producer. But when I knew Greg, he was in his early 20s. He was the Geg of Geggy Tah. So Tommy and Greg worked almost completely the opposite of the way Prince worked. So Prince, whom I believe was what we call in neuroscience a hyper-creative, Prince's ideas just kept coming. And so Prince had to work fast to get all these songs done and recorded, because the next song was backing up in his brain. He had to get to the next song. So we did a lot of songs very quickly. Now, Tommy Jordan is also a hyper creative. And I say that knowing what I'm talking about, because of all the people I ever worked with in the music business, I've only known two, Prince and Tommy Jordan. But Tommy's hyper creativity manifested in a complete opposite way from Prince's. Tommy would never let a song go, because the new ideas kept coming. And Greg and I just learned, just listen to him. Because when he says, wait, and he's got another idea for yet another thing we could pile onto this record, he usually knows what he's talking about. It's usually something good. So Tommy and Greg taught me more about music per se than any other musicians I've ever worked with. And Prince taught me more about the music business and success in this business, certainly, than any other artist I ever worked with.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that we, sharing so many stories about Prince here, because obviously we have rabid purple masses here, but I really dug deep into your work and went down some rabbit holes with you on Discogs, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But there are some things you did that I was not aware of and that I haven't heard you talk about, and I want to remedy that now. Mainly, we're going to get back to the Prince thing. Jeff, I'm hearing a little bit of that echo again. Yeah. Anyways, I want to make sure that, but I want to make sure that we are, mainly because some of this might be incorrect, but I have to know. One of my favorite albums of the 90s was Fishbone's Reality of My Surroundings. That album is just ska perfection. I mean, it's one of the greatest albums ever. And you are listed on the background vocals. Is that true or false? And if it's true, please tell me that story.
It could be true. I don't remember. So, the only connection I have with Fishbone that I'm aware of is, the great trombonist John McKnight also played for Gagita, and I remember working at Sunset Sound with Gagita, and we were in Studio 3, and there's a courtyard at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles, and Studios 2 and 3, both empty out into that courtyard. So Fishbone was in 2, and I was with my client in 3, and it sometimes happens in the studio where you just need gang vocals. You need a group of people to sing. So you'll just go to the next door studio and say, "Anybody free? Can anybody come and sing on this record?" So that could very well have happened. Folks do that for one another all the time. It was good of them to credit me. Yeah, that's really nice.
That's I saw that. My mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Mm.
Now I was born in '68, so for those of us who grew up as teens in high school in the '80s, you could not avoid Violent Femmes. A lot of people don't know who Violent Femmes are, but let me go on like a blister in the sun. But anyways, as part of my digging, I also found out, and if it's true or not, that you did some kind of instrumentation on a Violent Femmes record. True
I
or
did,
false?
yeah, I did work with them. So, it was early in my career as an independent record maker. I had left Prince, I'd left Minnesota, I was back in Los Angeles, and I had a manager, and the manager put me together with the great producer Michael Beinhorn. So Michael was just starting his career as a producer. I was just starting my career as an independent engineer, and the record that we were chosen to work on was this record called Debacle by Violent Femmes. And I'm laughing because it was a difficult record. It was difficult. Gordon Gano, lead singer, main songwriter of Violent Femmes, is brilliant. And a lot of brilliant people are, well, they're rare birds. And when you're in the studio with some of these rare birds, they can be full of surprises. They can be very unpredictable. They can have strange peccadillos. And Gordon had a heavy dose of all that. But we did work together. And although it wasn't the music wasn't, as Prince would have put it, the street I lived on. I didn't have a natural affinity for the music they were making. It wasn't my street, but I respected the hell out of them. They were fantastic guys. It was interesting because with that band, they didn't have a full drum kit. It was just a snare drum. So it was bass, snare drum, and then whatever Gordon was playing, which was usually guitar.
Wow.
And I think it's fantastic. Anyways, also, again, being a teen in the '80s, David Byrne, which you've already mentioned, I love Talking Heads. I mean, he seems like one of those mastermind geniuses that would be very intimidating to work for.
Yes.
But his demeanor also seems like he would be very accommodating and patient also. What's it like working with a guy like David Byrne?
Oh, you gotta love David Byrne. So, of course, I was a huge Talking Heads fan as well. He's as great as he is, and as much praise as he has received in awards and things. He's underrated. The guy's a brilliant musician.
Yes.
So what happened was David had signed up another producer engineer team, a duo, to produce his record that was ultimately titled David Byrne. And they were in New York. They had studio time booked. They were working together for a week. And as sometimes happens, you just realize you're incompatible. Like your musical ideas don't gel together. And the record that you find yourself making is not the record you wanted to make. So David let that producer and engineer team go. And I got a phone call on a Sunday night from my manager at that time. I was in Los Angeles. And he said, "How would you like to get on a plane tonight and go to New York and work with David Byrne?" And I had to say yes immediately. I couldn't stop and think about it. Yes, yeah, get me that ticket. I'm on my way to the airport. Let me pack my bag and off I go. So I'm on the plane and I'm flying from LA to New York and I'm thinking, oh no, what have I done? I said yes to producing and engineering David Byrne. Like, what am I going to say to David Byrne? And finally, before the plane landed, I figured out, here's what you're going to say. You're going to tell him what you think. That's why he's hiring you. He's asking you, what does it sound like to you? What do you think? And I'm going to tell him, okay, I can do that. Okay, fine. And it ended up being a really, really good time. The other co-producer was Arto Lindsay, kind of a New York avant-garde artist, and I was engineering and co-producing as well. And together we had some great musicians in the studio. And one of the first things you learn about David Byrne is he's really, really funny. He's got a great sense of humor, really funny. He really likes to laugh. He also has, I mentioned earlier, this methodology. He's got a strong work ethic. Prince did as well. He likes to plan his work days. He likes to know when we're starting. He likes to know what time we're going home. He's a busy man. So I remember one morning in the studio, we were at Clinton Recorders in New York, and I always traveled at that time with my little dog Gina, little Boston Terrier. And I would come to the studio in the morning, get there early and set up Gina and get her all ready to go and get ready for the day. So David came in and he poured himself a cup of coffee, and I had a little bowl of Gina's kibble sitting on the kitchen counter. And I heard David say, "What is this?" I turned around and David was eating the kibble.
Oh no.
He thought it was some kind of breakfast treat because I had just put the kibble in the bowl and I had just set it on the counter, and I turned around for something else. And David came in and he poured a coffee and he's eating this dog kibble.
No.
Didn't realize what it was. And I had to say, "This is the dog's kibble." And he laughed so hard. Whenever things were funny, David was the first guy to laugh. I just admire the hell out of him, and it was a true joy to work with that man.
Oh my God, it's
hilarious.
yeah.
Oh, so I'm so sorry. I thought I had put my phone on do not disturb.
Perfectly fine, but that's actually funny. Another one, and don't worry, Prince fans, we're going to get back to the Prince thing. Just relax, but because I really. It's not every day that you have the legendary Dr. Susan Rogers in the house right now to ask all these amazing questions. And I have to we're going to get to some Prince stuff. Trust me, you're going to just stay for the ride. You're fine. Bare Naked Ladies, you had mentioned this before. Many don't know this, but you were part of the magic behind the board on their 1 week. It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Anyways, after working with Prince, the Hit Factory, did you feel like that huge radio hit for them was like further validation for you about your prowess as an engineer? I mean, like, I can create hits outside of Paisley Park.
Yeah, my confidence was growing throughout the 90s, especially thanks to how much I learned. So when I left Prince, I knew how Prince made records. And Jeff, you said something earlier about this, which is very, very true. Prince's engineer in the 2000s, Dylan Dresdow, said you had to unlearn Prince because Prince was so unusual as a record maker. So when I left Prince in '87, I knew Prince's way of mixing, Prince's way of making records. And I quickly found out in the late '80s that doesn't apply. You can't apply those techniques to everyone else's music because not everyone else has the same arrangement skills or the same sensibility when making records. So it took me a while to learn how other people make records. The growth in my confidence really happened making 2 records back to back with Gegita, because they taught me so much about what music is and how it works. And then I made records with other people that didn't sell a lot but got a lot of critical praise and that I'm just hugely proud of. In particular, a record by Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck, not Jeff Beck. I meant Jeff Black. I never made a record with Jeff Beck. Jeff Black, a wonderful record called Birmingham Road. And Nil Latta, my first child with Nil Latta, was just an amazing record. I love that so much. And a Robin Ford record. So I knew I had the skills. So you don't necessarily need a hit to prove that to yourself. Hits are going to happen based on many, many factors beyond your control. It's the timing, and it's It's the management, and it's the record label, and it's how well the band does on tour, and it's radio. There's just so many factors that go into a hit, but having one is great, but not having one doesn't necessarily mean you didn't do your job well. I think for all of us who make records, it's always a long, slow climb. A life in the arts is a life in problem solving. The
Yeah,
longer
That's
you've been
powerful.
in the arts, the more problems you know how to solve. You'll spend your whole career in the arts and you'll never know how to solve all of them. I'll tell you a quick aside and I'll let you ask another question. But the legendary man, the great producer Phil Ramone, known for
Mhm.
his work, of course, with John Lennon and Billy Joel and all these great artists, I had the chance to mix a record for Phil Ramone. I was maybe 35 or so, and he was 57 at that time. We were at the Village Recorders in LA. And I was still at that stage where I did not feel mastery over my craft, and there were still problems that were still really hard to solve in mixing and engineering. So I got up my courage and I asked Phil one day in the studio. I said, "Phil, can you tell me at what age did the record making start to get easy for you?" And he just looked at me and he said, "Not yet." I came to discover that that was true for all of us. It doesn't get easy. It won't get easy because you're always going to be encountering problems you've never seen before. It's a life in problem solving.
Yeah, I think that's the case at any time a spotlight's on you. I mean, I occasionally will DJ, and I've done hundreds of shows, but it seems like no matter what happens, when you first have to start, it's like it's just that feeling of like, okay, I think it's just a performing thing. I mean,
Uh,
I don't know, it's just a spotlight scenario.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
No, I get that.
one of the things that we had said was, early before we did this interview, is that I asked some of the Funkatopians to submit their questions, any questions that they wanted to ask you, and I am actually watching. I see that Facebook is live again now, so we are going to be looking at some of these questions that are popping up.
Right.
If we don't get to your question, don't be offended. We got a lot that we want to go through, so I want to make sure that we kind of get to everybody as possible. But here are some of the questions. Well, here's one of the questions that came up. Funkatopian, now you may have answered this already. Funkatopian Karina Turnbull said that in a previous podcast, you had mentioned that you had only worked with or knew of one other artist that was as prolific as Prince. Can you share who you were referring to?
that was Tommy Jordan.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was Tommy Jordan. I've never known anyone who was such a fountain of nonstop creativity. In fact, it was Tommy Jordan who named the book. So the book is titled "This Is What It Sounds Like," and it's a Prince reference, but it's from When Doves Cry. This is
When
what it
doves
sounds like
cry.
when doves cry. So
Yeah, I was thinking later. This is what it feels like, is immediately when I
ah
hear it. Yeah.
yeah, no, this is and I had been struggling to come up with a title for the book. I was thinking of something to do with listening, something to do with love and listening or something. And I was out with Tommy. We were at Princeton with his dad. And Tommy stepped away for a minute and he came back and said to the table, "I got it. This is what it sounds like." Tommy's always got it. He always be counted on to have an idea. That is extremely rare. Now, for most of us, if you want to know a little bit about the neuroscience of it, for most of us, creativity starts with daydreaming and mind wandering. So
Yep.
artists need their private time. They need their daydreaming, mind wandering time. A lot of artists are said to have their heads in the clouds. Yeah, they do. They have their heads in the clouds because that's where those ideas come from, that
Mm.
just spacing out. Anyway, it activates some circuits that allow a new thought, a brand new thought to you to just kind of suddenly appear. When that new thought appears, we hang on it, we hang on it, we hang on it, like, yeah, that's cool. And there are a couple of circuits in the brain that open up and allow that pattern of neural activity to persist. And it doesn't, sometimes it's going to fly out of your head, but if you're lucky, it stays. And then you go, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to do that. I'm going to write that. I'm going to make that. And that's when those creativity circuits shut. They shut down and you move from art to craft. Art is original thought. Craft is building the thing you just thought of. So you go, yeah, yeah, I've got an idea. I've got an idea. And you grab your pen or you grab your guitar or your keyboard or whatever it is, and you start writing and you start creating. And now you're relying on your craft. And then you go back and you try to open up those circuits again. Now I need something here. And you switch back and forth between art and craft.
Mm.
Now, there are some folks, the folks that we label hyper creative, who actually have something called reduced inhibition in the brain circuits responsible for creativity, which means their creativity is like a fire hose and it simply doesn't shut off.
Yeah.
If they should be someone like Prince, who has tremendous craft, they can make anything that they can imagine in their heads. When I worked for him, the only thing Prince didn't do was play horn. He had Eric Leeds for saxophone. But other than that, if he could think of it, Prince wanted to be able to do it himself. And to answer the viewer's question, Tommy Jordan is similar, multi-instrumentalist, and as I said earlier, never stops thinking of new ideas. He's written thousands of songs over his lifetime. He's not prolific like Prince in the sense that he doesn't spend a lot of time recording and releasing his songs, but I've never known anyone more creative.
Wow. Kind of swaying back into the Prince stuff, or Prince related stuff, actually, a little bit of a side branch. Wendy and Lisa's Fruit at the Bottom. Did you work on the whole album or just specific songs?
It was the whole thing. Yeah.
So, and this is kind of what's interesting with Fruit on the Bottom for me, Fruit at the Bottom, is this is, I believe I have my timelines correct. This is on the tail end of them being fired from Prince and the Revolution, right before Sign of the Times, which, by the way, for those that don't know, Wendy and Lisa were very heavily involved in writing a lot of material on that album. And Prince releases the album, and lo and behold, songs that they wrote solely, like Colors and Visions, are gone. And all the work that they helped him with, they didn't get any credit at all. So, I mean, not even a thank you in the liner notes. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But, when you're working on this album with them, did you get a sense quietly or even verbally that they definitely felt like they had something to prove here? I mean, as if to say, we are excellent songwriters and this album will showcase what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's always true. And I think that's true for every artist. When I worked with them on Fruit at the Bottom, there were those old wounds. There was a lot of pain there. Because, as the saying goes, where there's pain, there has been love. Because those relationships, for all three of us, our relationships with Prince had been really intense and long-lasting. And there was genuine love there. Lisa had joined Prince, I think, in 1980. She'd been with him a long time. They'd been through a lot.
Yeah.
Wendy joined when she was young and impressionable. She had her 18th birthday when she was working for Prince. So the Prince experience was as far as Wendy knew, the seminal and perhaps even the biggest professional opportunity she would ever have. You don't know what the future holds for you. So she was 23 years old when she left Prince. And I remember her saying, maybe that was the highlight of my career. I'm 23 years old. So there was pain and a little bit of confusion. And there was, certainly a sense that, well, now the good thing that came from this is now it's our chance. Now we can show what we're capable of doing. And musically, they're different musicians than who Prince, than the musician Prince was. They have a different background. They have different sensibilities. They're brilliant musicians. I can't listen to Lisa play piano without just having tears running down. It's
amazing.
So incredible. And Wendy will just blow you away with what she knows. So yeah, it was their chance. Now they had all these musical strengths. It took them time to learn how to package that, how to be commercially viable artists. Would they be the kind of artists who would have top 10 singles? it didn't seem likely. Of course, their label wants them to try to do that, but no, they're as we would say, musicians, and they're going to make art that is not probably not going to appear on the Billboard Top 10 charts, but is going to appear on the smaller charts because of the style of art that they make.
Yeah, I would, and not to say that I would typically ever disagree with you, but I feel like Fruit at the Bottom was packed full of hits. I mean, if it had, I mean, Are You My Baby, the title track, I mean, everything. I would love to get them on the show one time because, and when I do, I'm going to get every single one. I have every single one of their CDs, Girl Brothers, everything. I have everything. I'm going to spread it out everywhere. I loved everything that they did because there was so much, the songwriting skills that they had were just, it's, yeah.
Oh, they're so amazing. But their work at that time wasn't a perfect fit for R&B radio. And remember R&B radio at this time, I mean, there were producers who were dominating R&B radio, and the Wendy and Lisa sound wasn't a perfect fit for that, nor was it a perfect fit for pop radio either. That's always a factor.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
They were a perfect fit for musicians that loved artists. So they were definitely the musician's musician.
I love them a lot.
Likewise.
Yeah, me too.
Did you work on Eroica?
I did. Yeah. I'd introduced them to my mentor, production mentor, Tony Berg. And Tony came and worked with us as well on that record and helped elevate that record to a higher level.
Crack in the Pavement, Skeleton Key, Why Wait for Heaven? Forget it.
I love that song, Mother of Pearl. I love that.
Great song too. Yeah.
Yeah. So beautiful.
We could have a little bit of a Wendy and Lisa love fest here. I would be all about it. But and we just kind of did. While you don't typically mention them in your bios, you know, I mentioned this at the top. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to our interview with the amazing Dr. Susan Rogers, Prince's engineer from 1983 to 1987, worked on his biggest albums, you know, Purple Rain, Parade, Around the World in a Day, Sign of the Times, and all that stuff in between. But also some of the things that you don't mention in your bios for whatever reason, you know, some of the Prince affiliated material that I mentioned at the top, like Tevin Campbell, Mavis Staples, Wendy and Lisa. Obviously, we just talked about that. Madhouse albums, Jill Jones, Andre Simone, Sheila E., The Family, Sue Ann, Maserati, Eric Leeds, Candy Dulfer, Sheena Easton. Oh, and I got to play this clip.
Yo, Kim, check out this. Susan, turn the guitar up a little bit.
Jesse.
And of course, Jesse Johnson's Every Shade of Love album. Yeah, I got to put that in there. You got to love having a shout out. You got to have. But I mean, you were neck deep in all of it. I mean, one might even say that, you know, and I kind of feel this way too, that you kind of helped Prince establish the sound of the 80s. Not just musically, obviously he was the one that was doing that, but it was something in the way that you mixed, and we're going to talk about this for a second, but do you feel like you do yourself downplay your involvement in that whole sound?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. You know, you can't see yourself. You need a mirror in order to see yourself, and other people can see you just fine. But you need a little bit of technology, a little bit of help in order to see yourself. And I think I have a hard time understanding what my contribution was. I'd like to respond to something you said about the bio, and then I'll get back to answering this question. In bios, usually what's most important for record makers is your production credits, unless you're known exclusively as a mixer or an engineer. So many of those artists that you mentioned, I worked with as an engineer or mixer. So I try to lean heavily on my production credits if it's just a short bio, because as a producer, that's where I'm going to, excuse me, that's where my sonic signature is going to be the most evident. I would have had the most control. So now to answer the question, record makers all have a sonic signature. For an engineer, for a mixer, you're pushing sound around to make it sound the way you like it to sound. All of us have ears that are ever so slightly different. When I was with Prince, I started with him as an audio technician. I wasn't an engineer. So I learned his ear. He taught me how he liked the snare drum to sound, how he wanted the hi-hat to sound, the effects he wanted on the vocal. When he called for big reverb, what that was. So I learned Prince's ear. Then I had to learn when to use Prince's ear working with other artists, and when I couldn't. And when I couldn't, I had no choice. I had to use my own ear and hope that it would be good, as all record makers have to do. So over the years, my ear developed, and I eventually found a sonic signature that personally I liked. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make art that you like. As a producer, instead of pushing sound around, you're pushing performances around in a sense. You're listening to performers on the other side of that glass. And you're deciding, is this going to work or isn't it going to work? You're arranging and you're coming up with parts. I was just in New York last week and I saw Ed Robertson from Bare Naked Ladies. I hadn't seen him in years, and he reminded me of something that I had forgotten about. So he played the demo of 1 week, and it was an acoustic guitar based demo, and he had used a little drum machine loop on there, and he remembers clear as a bell me saying, "That drum pattern is not cool." And he said it was an epiphany. I don't remember saying it, but it's something I would say. He said a light bulb went off and he realized, yeah, that's right. It's not cool.
Oh my gosh.
I think it was it was probably some little hip hop thing, which was not cool, not cool. So we had to do a straighter drum rhythm. But yeah, that's you grow into your sonic signature. You learn from your mistakes, and you learn what will work in some contexts and not in others.
So for you, ultimately, you developed an ear, and then you redeveloped your ear.
Yeah, I developed Prince's ear, and
Right.
then I developed my own.
Wow.
And this is not, you mentioned sonic signatures, and which I'd never heard that term before. Is that a common term?
Fairly common. Record makers use it.
Okay. And this is not a knock, but for me, we talked a little bit about Jesse Johnson's Every Shade of Love, and a lot of Jesse Johnson's production work back in the 80s, he had and what he did for other artists had a very specific sonic signature. I mean, I loved Jesse Johnson. Let's be real clear. I was here. Let me show you how obsessed with Jesse Johnson I was. You guys ready for this? All right, everybody ready? I apologize if you're on the Funked Up app because this is a visual thing. This is how obsessed I was with Jesse. To be clear, I am showing a picture of me circa 1980. I don't even know what it was. Probably 85, 86. And this is on the heels of Jesse Johnson's review when he was wearing the pink suits. And I have no idea where I even got the pink suit. But I had the accompanying pink tie and the whole thing. Of course, that's my grandmother who's no longer with us, sitting there smoking a cigarette. So 80s. But I was obsessed with, and I think this is hilarious. This is, Anyways, I was obsessed with Jesse Johnson. And I think one of the things that's funny is that, when he did production work, you could always, I actually showed that picture to Jesse Johnson, just so we're clear, and he laughed his butt off. I think it was kind of part laughing and part feeling sorry for me. But when he did production work, you could always tell that it was Jesse, mainly because of that signature chunky rhythm guitar. Here's a sample of that.
Do you think it's real or true?
That is that signature sonic, that chunky rhythm guitar that was his sonic signature. That's a clip from Tamara and the Scene's Blueberry Gossip that Jesse was on. That exact rhythm guitar riff was on a lot of tracks that he touched. And when you heard it, you were like, Jesse, nothing wrong with it, but very identifiable. And, speaking of Jesse, since we're here real quick, you work with Jesse Johnson on Every Shade of Love. And there was definitely a rival there, obviously, going on between Jesse and Prince. Some spoken, some unspoken. Some would say, oh, no, I'm not worried about him, and vice versa, and whatever. Do you remember anything ever specifically during that recording session where maybe Jesse was wanting to replicate something that Prince had done, maybe even in the recording, the way that you recorded or mixed, or vice versa?
So on the surface, Jesse wanted to be his own artist, just as Jimmy and Terry did, and just as Dickerson and Andre Simone did. They all wanted to, Wendy and Lisa as well. But Prince cast a giant shadow. So for all of Prince's proteges, they're starting their careers in this shadow, and they're trying to move over into the light. So how do you do that? And if you're going to come up with your own sound, you can't avoid the fact that his sound just happens to be the most popular sound of the day. So how far away from that do you want to go? If you're someone like Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman, you had a sound before you joined Prince, so you're just going to carry on with where you were. But for other musicians who really developed their sound in Prince's shadow, I think it was really a struggle to figure out just how much are you going to change your sensibility so that you don't sound like you're copying him and you sound like you're your own artist. If you just happen to enjoy the same things that he enjoys, the same guitar sound, the same snare sound, if you happen to enjoy those things, well, gosh, it's sad because you're going to be accused of imitating him when maybe it just was, homologous evolution, I suppose.
Well, were you ever caught up in that to where while they were trying to, I don't know, stand out or come out from under that shadow, did anyone ever come to you with what do you think kind of questions?
Oh, definitely. I think the idea when working with Jesse and working with other artists, maybe who had been heavily influenced by Prince, the idea was to just keep those blinders on and just stay focused on whatever we can find that's going to be good, that we're going to like, and is going to establish that this artist is not Prince, nor is this artist trying to be Prince. There were other artists that you'd hear on the radio who definitely sounded like Prince imitators, but we can't accuse Jimmy and Terry or Jesse or Andre of being that. They were artists in their own right. So no, I don't think you don't think about it much. What Jesse and I talked about a lot is the same thing, same conversations I had with Wendy and Lisa. Oh, there's a lot of emotional unpacking that has to happen. I mean, working with Prince was just so extraordinary. I suppose it would be like being an astronaut and you've just been on the International Space Station for 4 years and now you're back on Earth. And you do have to kind of say, what was that? Like, what was that? The people that Prince had working for him, they started with him when they were young and pretty much unknown. So you went from unknown to huge. And now you've just been put back down on Earth. Who are you? Are you unknown again? Are you huge? Who are you? We all had to do that sort of delayed invention of ourselves and finding ourselves. All of us took a little bit of time, if I'm being honest, to find who we were after Prince.
Yeah, I can imagine, because as they start to grow again, they're finding that the fans that they are getting are residual from Prince. They don't feel like their own fans yet. I would think until they finally realize, yeah, you are somebody. you are great.
It takes a little minute and it can be done. I think we all did it successfully, but it takes a psychological rebuilding of your image of yourself and your importance to the field. No one wants to be the person who just is reliving their glory days and going around saying, remember me? I used to work for Prince. I used to be the Prince's, I don't know, keyboard player, guitar player, drummer. I was great. Remember, you liked that. So yeah, let me just keep doing that. No one wants to be that. What you want to be is you want to discover yourself and be your own artist independently of him.
Well, We only had a couple more questions regarding production from Funkatopian, so let's go ahead and get those out of the way so we can start hammering away some of these Prince questions here. Not that some of these aren't, they're all Prince related pretty much, but Funkatopian Peter Castle asked, what were the regular vocal chain and regular guitar chains for Prince's recordings that you worked on?
You got it. Okay, so the mic preamps that Prince liked were custom designed by a fellow named Frank DiMedio. And Frank DiMedio built the recording console that's at Sunset Sound in Studio 3 that's still there. And Prince had him build a console, especially for him, which is still there today in Paisley Park. Prior to Prince working on that console, a standard API mic preamp was the mic preamp that came closest to Frank DiMedio. So an API mic preamp, that's a nice discrete circuit preamp, the older ones anyway, and it's got a lot of gain. Then after you come out of the preamp, for Prince, because he was an expert singer, by the time I worked with him, he knew how to ride the microphone. The experts don't need a lot of compression. Any of you out there who are young recording engineers, remember that. If you're working with a beginning artist, use a compressor on the vocal. But if you're working with an experienced artist like Prince, you don't need a compressor, you need a limiter. So the Telefunken LA2A limiter was fine for him because he knew how to ride the mic to get the presence or the distance that he wanted. So those two things would give you enough gain to get to the tape machine back in those days when we had bones in our hair, you know, and we dressed like Wilma Flintstone and we had the dinosaur out in the parking lot. Back in those days, you'd feed it into the tape machine. Now the tape machine, tape recording is different from digital recording. Analog recording, talk about a sonic signature, adds distortion byproducts. It adds harmonic distortion to the signal. So what comes out of the machine is different from what went in. And we liked it. We liked it. It boosted certain frequencies. It cut others. It was warm. It was rich. So we come back off the tape machine. And then the reverb that he liked, at Sunset Sound, we had an echo chamber. We could use the natural echo chamber. But if you weren't at Sunset, if you were at Paisley or somewhere else, an EMT plate reverb was always nice. The Lexicon, for those who are audio engineers, Lexicon made the great 480L. And before that, it was the 240L. And for me, I always dialed up for him kind of a medium room. A large chamber was okay if you added some pre-delay onto that patch. Yeah, kind of customize his reverb to get it warm and soft the way he liked it. But that was his vocal chain. Now the guitar chain, let's take the number one recording guitar from the 80s for him was that Telecaster copy, the Hohner guitar. Looks like a Telecaster. It's made by Hohner. And he liked in those days 11 gauge strings, thick strings, strong fingers, you know, and he could bend those notes. I heard that later in life he had to switch to the thinner gauge because, you know, you start to get a little bit of arthritis and stiffness in your fingers. But when I worked for him, it was the 11 gauge strings. So you take that guitar and he would always run it through. Well, he loved his, you know it well, I think, his Roland Boss effects pedals. Yeah. Those effects pedals were his secret ingredient. He needed that on his guitar, on his keyboards, certainly on the LM1 drum machine that he used. The output of that LM1 drum machine would run through this effects pedals with these Roland Boss foot pedals, and you could mix and match them. So he liked to have the flanger, the purple flanger. He used that a lot. And he liked the chorus, and he liked the heavy metal pedal that was yellow. There was a distortion one that was orange. He liked that. There was delays in there, and you could put, I think, 6 of them in the case, plus a little power supply. So you take your guitar, you run it through those effects pedals. You can bypass them if you don't want it. The output of that, I always used a Countryman direct box. I liked the Countryman on his guitar. Still love the Countryman to this day. I didn't want a transformer direct box because a transformer is going to add some distortion byproducts you didn't need for his guitar. I wanted a clean sound. So I would use the Countryman and again feed it into the tape machine. If it was going to be amplified, if his guitar was going to go through an amp and have distortion, he always used the same guitar amp. It was a Mesa Boogie head and a bag end cabinet, and that was just his go-to. And the funny thing about Prince is sometimes people who don't know him that well say he was always experimenting, and I have to correct them and say no, he wasn't. He was not experimenting at all, because experimentation takes time. The thing that Prince loved more than anything is to walk into the studio and have all of his familiar stuff set up and routed and ready to go. If he could walk in and his drums are ready, whether it's acoustic drums or this LM1 drum machine, his bass is tuned, sitting there ready to go, his guitars are ready, everything is routed, everything's mic'd, everything's ready to record, he was happy. He didn't want to experiment because that takes time and that pulls resources away from the original thinking he was doing of writing and coming up with arrangements and parts.
Wow.
You mixing engineers need to stop and smoke a cigarette now, what I imagine. Because that was amazing. Yeah, that is going to be a clip for sure that people are going to revisit over and over and over again.
Absolutely. First thing I'm going to do when we're done is set up my chain, because I have a lot of those pedals.
Yeah, you want those pedals. You want for your vocal. Well, the vocal mic would either be the Neumann, the Tube U47. For those who have to ask, you cannot afford it.
Can't.
No. You cannot afford it because they're ridiculously expensive now because they're quite old. These old tube mics. When we were at rehearsal, though, he went totally in the opposite direction because we did a lot of recording at rehearsal. A lot of the Around the World in a Day album was recorded at rehearsal through a horrible signal chain, for the most part. And he'd use that Sennheiser stage mic. I want to say that the model number was the D330. I don't remember the exact model number, but the one that you'd see him with in videos on stage through Purple Rain, Sign of the Times. He used that in the studio.
My favorite mic, my Sennheiser.
Yeah.
It's my favorite mic.
It's a good mic.
So Pamela Weiss asks, can you please describe the final process or a completed song with Prince in detail? For example, would he listen to the final mix together with you and then say when it's done? And she says, I imagine that he could be a bit impulsive and possibly wouldn't want to replay it too much. Was there like a specific process you guys had after you completed a final mix?
Yeah, everything was a constant flow with him. Constant. He was always working, always working, always working. It was rare for us to put a tape aside and come back and mix it later. We did, of course. We did that plenty of times, but it wasn't as common. His usual way of working was he liked to be getting the sounds and getting the mix together as we were overdubbing. After he'd finish a vocal, he'd usually take a break and I'd have a chance to sit at the console and rebalance things and maybe play around and dial in some things. And then he'd come in, we'd add more ornamentation, or he'd add more ornamentation. And then I could dial in sounds. And certainly it's well established that Prince was very hands-on. So he might ask me can you give me a long delay? Or can you give me a chorus? Or he knew what he wanted and he'd ask for it and I'd set it up for him, dial it in, do what I knew he liked. And then the effects would be ready to go. I could sneak in some new things as well when we had new gear, which we could afford. We had some new gear in the studio, and if I found a new patch that I thought he might like, I'd dial it up and I'd put it on something. If he liked it, it would stay. If he didn't, it was out of there quickly. So he was deciding what he liked, but yeah, you're pushing sound around and with the ultimate goal of deciding, is this ready to go? Is this going to go on record or is this going to go in the vault? And then we would print a mix. When it was ready to go, we'd print a mix. Sometimes before we printed it, I used to enjoy this. He'd make a cassette and we'd ride around in the car and listen to it in the car and just figure out, what's it need? Is it working? I enjoyed that with him. I remember tooling around in Los Angeles in this ivory-colored Rolls Royce he had with teak wood on the inside of it and this slate blue leather. inside. It was really a beautiful, beautiful car. Imagine Prince driving around Los Angeles in a convertible Rolls Royce, but he did. So that was nice. He also had his Thunderbird at home in Minnesota, and we'd ride around in that. So sometimes you ride around, listen to it, come back into the studio, make a few tweaks, and then print it and go to bed. But by the time we'd finished with a song, we're tired. We'd been in the studio for 20, 24 hours, often longer. So you print it, you go to bed. He would listen to it when he woke up and decide whether or not he was going to revisit it at a later time, or if it was fine, good to go.
Mm. All right, so we have some unusual. This is such fantastic information. I know a lot of people are geeking out. I know there's a lot of people wanting to put some follow-up questions here, but we've got so much to get through. I want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. Funkatopian Arlene Oak asked that Prince was quite a believer in name-related coincidences. For example, the quotation she referenced a quotation from a November 17th, 1996 New York Times thing. Mentioned that marrying Maite seemed inevitable since her middle name was Janelle. His father's is John L. Her mother's name is Nell. He was born Prince Rogers Nelson, Nell's son. And he kind of said that at least half seriously. So it begs the question, did Prince ever attach any significance to the fact that your last name is Rogers?
I don't think he did. If he did, he didn't say anything. Maybe he thought so privately, but he didn't say anything. Yeah, it's well established that Prince was very spiritual. How I can't imagine how you could not be if you have all this great fortune fall in your lap when you're 18 years old and things are going so great, it's beyond your wildest dreams.
Right.
It would be quite natural to think that it must be fate, or that someone is looking out for you, or that the hand of Providence is making sure that certain things happen in your life. I mean, it would be kind of terrifying to have all this happen before you're 25 years old.
Yeah, it's staggering.
You've got to have a coping mechanism that says that someone or something else is at least partially in control, because this is kind of terrifying. So he did, he was spiritual, and he did put a lot of stock in fate. When you started the question, I remembered something that happened. It's really kind of cool. We were in pre-production for doing the movie Under the Cherry Moon, and he was writing the songs that would appear on the Parade album. We were at home in Minnesota, and we were at rehearsal in the warehouse where we were in Minnesota, and we suddenly picked up some RF radio frequencies, and that didn't happen. It was extremely rare, but somehow, I think through one of the wireless mics, one of the guitar transmitters or something, we picked up some radio, and it was coming out through the speakers. And dig this, the song that was playing on the radio was a song that went, "Mary Hill used to hang out in Cherry Hill Park, playing songs all the way after dark." And Prince didn't know the song as well as I did. I don't think he had listened to the pop radio that I did in Southern California, but he picked up some of the words, and he said, "What is that?" I said, "Don't you know that song? It's Cherry Hill Park. Mary Hill used to hang out in Cherry Hill Park." And I swear we both got goosebumps, because Mary, of course, was the love interest in the movie, and it was Under the Cherry Moon. Mary Hill and Cherry Hill Park. Why that song and not any other song? And it was, as I said, very, very rare, extremely rare to pick up RF in the studio. What are the odds that it would be that song?
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, I don't think I recall that song, but the coincidence of the lyrical content of that is just unbelievable.
Yeah. The tagline was, "Because Mary Hill was such a thrill after dark in Cherry Hill Park." It was a good single. If you look up the lyrics, it'll tell you. I don't remember who the artist is, but you can find it. It's a big hit.
Wow. All right, Funkatopian Ben Petrick wanted to know, how did Prince? We talked about this before. How did Prince pay you? Was it hourly, per session, an annual salary? And I guess, and an add-on to that question, did you have to start as an apprentice? Did you just kind of how did that all work?
No, I didn't start as an apprentice. I was an
I didn't.
experienced technician when I joined him. I'd been working in Los Angeles for 5 years, and I was no piker. I knew my stuff. I was a competent technician. I mean, I'd only just turned 27 years old, but I'd been at it. I guess I'd been at it 5 or 6 years at this point. I was good. I knew my stuff.
I think
Uh,
apprentice is bad word. I think trial period probably was
oh,
Yeah,
better.
yeah.
trial.
This probably with Prince is always going to be a trial period, and if
Right,
the
right, right.
trial period is it's over when he decides that you're not the right one for the job. So yeah. Anyway, I lasted. Yeah, I was his full-time employee, so I got a weekly salary. It might have been every 2 weeks or something like that, just a weekly paycheck. I was well paid, not millionaire kind of money, but that's one thing about Prince. He paid well. He was always fair and decent to the people who worked for him. Here's a story that your listeners might enjoy. So my very first tour was the Purple Rain tour, and I didn't know how it worked, but I was learning. I learned that there was a tour manager, and there's a lot of people on that tour. You've got everything from the truck drivers and the bus drivers to
Right.
you've got the riggers, and you've got the lighting, and you've got the sound people, you've got costume, you've got hair, you've got makeup, you've got carpenters, you've got a safety guy. It's a lot of people. So the tour manager has to get all these people together for a big meeting before you go out on the road to tell you, here's what's up. And what they would do in the 80s is they would hand out to each crew member a booklet. Well, it was more like a 3-ring binder. And in this binder would be your itinerary. Here are the cities we're going to. And there'd be information there. Here's the hotel you're staying in. Here's where you get your laundry done. Here are the restaurants that are open 24 hours because you go to a new city and before the internet, you needed that information. It was really hard to get your laundry done while you were on tour. So you needed to know all these things. Here's where the banks are, and here's where the post office is if you have to send something home. So they gave us these binders. And then the part of the story I wanted to share with you is that the tour manager was saying to this whole big room, we were at a Holiday Inn in one of their big meeting rooms, to this whole crew, he said, I want to tell you something. Our boss is a very generous boss because he has decided that on this tour that goes for months, each and every crew member is going to get his or her own room. And that room just exploded in applause. And because I was new, I didn't know what's the big deal. And the experienced crew members told me afterward, that's just not done. It's twice as much money. I mean, they always have the crew guys double up. You always have to double up. You have to share a room. We're
Right.
gonna and what Tom, I don't remember his last name, but Tom was our tour manager, and he said, Prince wants everyone to be happy. We're gonna be out for a long time. We've got to do a great job. You need to be happy. You need to be comfortable. So
Wow.
that's the kind of person he was. He did not take his money and buy airplanes or villas in Tuscany or things like that. I mean, later on he splurged on that Rolls Royce, but he put his money back into his art and into his work. He didn't scrimp on his tools. He didn't scrimp on the people who helped him keep that train running at that high clip.
Man,
So smart.
that's incredibly generous for
That's
sure.
Mm.
I've heard I always do the numbers. I'm one of these guys that goes into a concert and I look at the staff and everything that's running and I start doing numbers in my head. Well, he's got to be making this and he's got to be making this. And I'm looking at the seats and doing math in my head. I don't
Mhm.
know why I do that. I think other people do that too. But you indicate in your book, which for those just joining us, we're talking to Dr. Susan Rogers. And she's got a brand new book out. This is What It Sounds Like. You need to pick up this book. Obviously, the green screen activity on that still not working. But anyways, in the book, you mentioned that Prince had a studio policy that he referred to as no non-combatants. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, that was just something he would say when he wanted Alan Leeds or someone who was his operations manager. Sometimes it would be his career manager, Steve Farnoli, when he wanted the room cleared. And that might happen on a movie set or a video set. No non-combatants meant I don't want anyone in this room who isn't working. I don't want anyone who's just was just observing.
Mm.
You know, Prince was intensely private. He needed that personal headspace in order to work. So, in the recording studio, that was the norm. No non-combatants. That's you wouldn't have visitors in the recording studio, at least with the style of music that I worked on, the alternative indie and funk and dance stuff. That changed a bit culturally when hip hop was introduced, because in hip hop sessions, I haven't done them, but I know about them. Hip hop sessions would be more inclined to bring visitors into the studio. You're bringing your inspiration into your room. It could be guys you know, or women you know, or dogs you know. You bring those pit bulls into the studio, but you're bringing your inspiration into the studio with you as you work. But for other styles of music, traditionally, that simply wasn't done.
People brought pit bulls into the studio.
Oh yeah, yeah, all kinds of stuff. I like seeing a dog in the studio.
Oh yeah, I do too. I don't remember seeing lots of pictures of that. All
Mm.
right, let's talk about the vault for a second. You are the originator of Prince's fabled vault, and there does seem to be a division among his fans about what ultimately Prince's vision was for the material in that vault. I mean, and ultimately, I'm not to keep using that word, but correct
Mm.
me if I'm wrong, the vault was simply a necessity, mainly because his output was just like nonstop, and it had to be created in order to keep a running library of his staggering output that you've referred to a few
Mm.
times here, just to avoid having to go back and forth to the various studios and other locales that the sound recordings resided in or whatever. Uh, Is that a fair assessment of why the vault started?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I I do take credit for starting the vault, because I remember my thinking, and I remember my procedure, and well, I just did it. I remembered the problem I was trying to solve. When I first came to work for him, he would occasionally ask me for a tape, and he'd ask me for tapes, obviously, of songs that hadn't been released yet. That's why he wanted the tape. It was stuff to work on. So I didn't know these titles. He might mention a title, and I'd think, oh, where am I going to find this tape? And then I learned sometimes I had to say to him, I can't get that tape because apparently it's not here. So I needed to know right away, where's all his stuff? There were tapes in his house. There were tapes at the warehouse. There were tapes out at Sunset Sound and at other local Minneapolis recording studios from his early days. There were tapes in other Los Angeles studios where he had worked before Sunset Sound. I just had to get all this stuff so that everything's all in one place. And then his staff had to help me out by coming up with a database for all of these titles so that I knew exactly where everything was if he asked for it. So I started just gathering everything. Of course, the women who worked as his staffers, they helped with all that. But the point was, let's just get it all in one place. There were so many tapes, and this is before we had a physical vault. It's before Paisley Park. You didn't want to keep them in a warehouse because that's not temperature controlled, and tape is kind of vulnerable. So we found a place in Minneapolis, just down the street from the warehouse, the rehearsal warehouse, that did records storage. I mean, records like document storage.
Right.
And they provided a temperature controlled, protected environment. And they gave us 24/7 access. So we were able to label each roll of tape with a code, with a number. And then there was a catalog. There was an early computer. There was a database. Everything was cataloged. And that was that was the start of what ultimately became the vault. Now, the other part of your question about whether or not the material in the vault should be released, we don't know. He didn't leave instructions, but here's what I believe with all my heart. I know that he was proud of the work we did in the years when I was with him. I can't speak to before or after, but when I was with him in that prolific period, he was proud. And the reason I know he was proud is there was a handful of times when he was not proud of something he had done, and he would hold up the 3 fingers in the shape of a W, and W meant weak. And I can count them on one hand, but there were a few times where he held up that W, and that meant take a Sharpie, write a big W on the tape box, circle it, and as he said to me the first time, and don't ever let me play that tape again. It's weak.
Wow.
Wow.
It happened rarely. It was just there'd be things he didn't like. Everything else he was proud of. It didn't go on record at that time because there were other songs that he said something similar, and he said it better elsewhere. It wasn't the right time for this particular lyrical statement or whatever, so it went in the vault. He pulled many of those things out later to give to other artists. He revamped some of that stuff on subsequent records, but I don't believe for a minute that the stuff in the vault is stuff that he didn't want people to hear. I think he wanted people to hear these things.
Yeah, Funkatopia and Nikolaj Schumacher. The question was, I'm not re-asking the same question, but it is, what is your opinion about all the music and video in the vault? I mean, how much of you kind of feel like probably deserves to be published or released?
So I think, well, I know there are several different audiences for Prince's recorded work, and they all want something a little bit different. There are the fans. The fans want to hear everything he's done because they like his music and they want to know this artist even better. So yeah, they want to hear everything he's done. Then there's another audience that's an audience that doesn't know Prince at all, maybe younger kids who they weren't around when he was coming up, and they're just discovering him for the first time, and they're going to be listening to his music with very different ears. So that's a separate audience. There's an audience rather of music critics and scholars, the people who write about Prince music and the people who write about music in general, American music in particular. What contribution did Prince actually make in terms of the whole arc of musical history? What was his greatest contribution? What should we be looking to him for? So critics and scholars have an important role to play, and analyzing his music is one way in which they can do their work. And then the next audience is, of course, the historians, the ones who are talking about the history of American music, and they'll benefit from having the full story of Prince's contribution to American music. To use his own lyrics, and I'll say, those kinds of cars don't pass you every day. Prince was a really extraordinary musical mind.
Yeah.
And it would behoove scholars to study that kind of musical mind and to understand, where did that kid come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So one more question about the vault. And it's kind of it's kind of a little bit of a two-part question, but it's from Funkatopia and Pamela Weiss. I kind of have an addendum on the end of this though too. First one is, I think you kind of already answered this, is did you already have discussions about Prince, about what his intentions were for the vault after he was gone? I don't think that he assumed that he would be gone before you or anybody. I just for whatever reason, I just don't think that his mortality was in his mind. I think it would have been more laid out. But the second part of her question was, do you think that he would approve of the remastering of a lot of his work that's being put out now? Because obviously if he had already mixed it and he had already done it, we kind of felt like that was the best version of it. But before you answer that two-part question, I know that there was a New Yorker article where Prince had issues with someone, might have been you, I'm not sure, but that had stated that it was that they wanted to protect the vault, that it was their God-given right to protect the vault. And I guess something about that comment did not set well with him in that article, where he said some unnecessary things and essentially ended with, I still have to brush my own teeth, basically insinuating that the only person who's going to control the vault is going to be me. So with that interview in mind, going back to the two questions of Pamela, did you ever have discussions about Prince, again, what he thought his intentions with the vault were? And again, do you think that he would approve of the remastering of the stuff that's being put out?
Yeah, I don't know who offered that quote in the New Yorker article. It certainly wasn't me. I never thought that or believed that. How presumptuous would that have to be to
Right.
think that I would have anything to do with what he decides to put out? Of course not. And if it should be discovered that it's attributed to me, then I gotta tell you, I was seriously misquoted because I never thought or believed anything like that. It's not who I am. Here's what I believe firmly. While an artist is alive, that artist is the one who's in control of his or her public image. They decide what interviews to do and what interviews to not do. They decide what to release and what not to release. They decide what to destroy and what to preserve. It's their life, their career, their reputation, their public image. It belongs to them. It does not belong to their audience or anyone else who may have been involved in that creation. It's the creator's property. After a person passes away, if they've left no instruction as to what to do with their property, then it's no longer their decision to make because they can't make that decision. They chose not to make that decision. They chose not to leave instructions or a will. So now you get to hit the reset button. What matters now is not Prince's public image in the way that he would control it, because he can't control it. The book is closed. The chapters have all been written. He is no longer with us. What matters now is his legacy. So now we have to think differently about the material in the vault. You think about it one way, or he would think about it one way while he was alive. Now that he's gone, it's his legacy that matters. So what should those of us who know anything at all about him, what should we say about that? We should just say what we think. We don't know if we're right or wrong. There's no way of knowing if we're right or wrong. There's no way of knowing what he would have wanted. It's just an educated guess. You had mentioned the remixes. What would he think about it? Oh, he'd have opinions. He was very opinionated. And he wouldn't have someone else taking his material and doing remixes without his permission. He was supremely in control of his work while he was alive, as it should be. That's the way to do it. But now that he's gone, I can tell you that the mixer, Nico Bolas, who did some of those remixes, in my view, did a fantastic job. I'm so happy that Nico Bolas did those mixes. I'm so happy about that. I'm so happy that the great Michael Howe, record executive, oversaw these big releases that have come out. I've never known a record executive to be more respectful and conscientious than Michael Howe. All the conversations I had with him, I could just imagine Prince just smiling at this man for his conscientiousness, his respect, his admiration, his thoughtfulness. He put a lot of thought and care into those releases. I admire the hell out of that. I don't know how it could have been any better, actually.
Wow. I think about that now that you've mentioned this. You've worked on Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day, Parade, and Sign of the Times, two of which, Purple Rain and Sign of the Times, have had these deluxe or super deluxe, reiterations. I know you got to be loving this because you've got to be seeing some of this stuff that was tucked away in the vault now, is finally kind of leaking out. Was there any specific song off of, was there any specific songs off of that you can think of on the top of your head, either off of Purple Rain or Sign of the Times, these deluxe editions that you were like, oh my God, I'm so glad that's finally out?
Oh yeah. I had mentioned earlier, I just finished mentioning how much I respected Michael Howe. And one of the things that Michael did after Prince passed away is he asked me, what do you think should be released? I was really touched by that. Like, who am I to say, of Prince's entire career, what should be released? But that's how respectful Michael is. He asked all the people who were involved at that time, what do you think was great? And the first song I mentioned was a song that I did not record. It was before my time, but it was the song Moonbeam Levels. Moonbeam Levels I loved so much, and we would pull it out of the vault and we'd occasionally sequence it on an album when I was working with Prince. It was at one point it was going to be on the Purple Rain album. At one point it was going to be on the Parade album. At one point it may have even been considered for Sign of the Times, but I don't remember. He would put it on and then take it off. And I loved it so much. So I'm really happy that Moonbeam Levels was released. There's another one around the Sign of the Times era called In a Large Room with No Light. I just love that.
That's an amazing.
Love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was so excited to see it because obviously, being the huge junkie that I was obviously absorbing any, I guess we referred to them as bootlegs back in the 80s, 90s. I'd get the cassettes and I was just like, I just heard so many of these songs way before they were ever released. I was like, oh, I cannot wait for the official release. Because I never saw bootlegs as, it's just an opportunity to hear something. But once it officially comes out and you get an official, clean, mastered mix, you're gonna buy it. That's just all there is to it.
Absolutely.
I've never known any person that listens to bootlegs that's just like, oh, I don't need to get the official release of this. This is fine. This version is perfectly okay with me.
Do you know the story of what the Dutch fans thought that Moonbeam Levels was?
No.
Yeah. So I have a friend over in the Netherlands who's an avid collector. And he told me that they thought Moonbeam Levels was Never Stupid. So the cassette copy was so bad. It was so degraded. And when Prince would come over and play concerts there in the Netherlands, fans who were avid collectors would be yelling up to the stage, "Never Stupid! Never Stupid!" He must have wondered, what is this? Never Stupid? Why are they screaming "Never Stupid" at me? They thought the lyrics were da, 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 never stupid. That was really funny.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. All right. We're gonna talk about the big albums here, but I only have a few questions on each of them because again, you have been asked every question known to man about the albums that you worked on. So I wanted to try to pride myself. I know that we've repeated some stories that you've told before, but some people haven't heard all these stories. But I also wanted to do my best to try to avoid the monotony as best as possible by asking, just a few questions about some of the main albums that you worked on that everybody obviously knows about, starting with Purple Rain. Darling Nikki. The mix on that one is so drastically different than the rest of the album. And I know that it was because it was recorded in an alternate location with just Prince doing his thing, but it seems like that mix on Darling Nikki was intentionally, I didn't say, that's the capabilities of wherever he was at. That may be the case, but it seems like it was an intentionally muddier to maybe give it more of a gritty, dirty feel. The story goes that the production and mix of the song was 100% all him and at a totally different location. Is that true? And were you not given the opportunity to kind of blend it with the feel of the other songs? Was he insistent that it maintain that raw and reverb heavy sound?
Yeah. So when I joined Prince, the song had already been recorded and mixed. In fact, I think that was the very first tape he ever had me put up in the studio. He asked me to put it up for something because I remember listening to it alone in his home studio, just right across the hallway from his bedroom. And I actually looked around to see if there was anyone else in the room with me, because as a Prince fan, hearing a brand new Prince song, especially one that powerful, I just remember thinking, oh, is anybody else hearing this? Like, this is, I could not believe that moment. It has stuck with me my whole life, being alone in his house, listening to a new Prince song. So the sound of it, yeah, it's raw and dirty, like the lyrics in that record. Yeah. It's sometimes the sonic picture is actually assisting with the message of the lyrics. We all know that Prince felt psychologically a powerful dichotomy between his spiritual faith and belief, his gratefulness to God, his desire to be a good, decent person, not to blow this gift he'd been given, juxtaposed against lust and a desire to be sinful and to cross that line. So anytime he would write a song where he's just in the throes of sexual captivity, yeah, he'd kind of go overboard. He'd kind of rough it up a little bit. He'd kind of deliberately give it not the same degree of care that he would give to something like Computer Blue or The Beautiful Ones or even Purple Rain. He's trying to say, this is just pure desire coming out. This is desire coupled with, of course, brilliant lyric writing and things like that. But yeah, having that mix be dirty would have served him just perfectly. I've talked in other interviews before about technical mistakes that went on record because it worked for him, like the song "The Ballad of Dorothy Parker," running through a messed up recording console and actually sounding a little bit like it was underwater. Well, yeah, the song was inspired by a dream. Perfect. That was a happy accident. He was happy with that. And another time it's famous now is that I accidentally had the preamp set 10 dB too hot on his vocal chain for the vocal on "If I Was Your Girlfriend." Well, good for him, because he's actually saying something that a lot of men in that day and age didn't say. If I was your girlfriend. It was kind of forward thinking, having some distortion on that vocal, having that vocal be squashed a little bit and a little bit scratchy and sound like it's coming through a cheap mic. Okay, that puts a little psychological distance now between you and the listener. So Prince liked a little bit of dirt in his music. And before I wrap up, I know I'm long-winded, but I mentioned Tommy Jordan earlier, the Tommy who is so creative, and I have so many quotes from Tommy, but Tommy always says, we got to remember, music is an expression of life. Life is clean and it's dirty. It smells sweet and it stinks. It's fragile and it's robust. It's simple and it's complex. Prince knew that music was an expression of his life, and there was simply no need to make it perfect. You could have some dirt under your nails when you're making music, and it's fine. Here's another example: The Cross. I'll never figure out why he was okay with that tempo speeding up on The Cross. I thought for sure we were going to redo the drums. He was happy with it. It said what he wanted to say. That's all that mattered.
Yeah, once it started rolling, he was just like it's just part of the flow. It's interesting that you mentioned that dichotomy about the God and wanting to sin and everything, because I had heard a story too that that's intentionally how he created a lot of his singles too. Like he had Purple Rain, and on the flip side he had God, and there was like a few singles that were like that, where he would have one song that would say one thing and then the flip side would say something totally different. So it's an interesting amount. So as far as Darling Nikki was concerned, was the backmasking on that already as well?
No, we did that as a sequence piece, if I'm remembering correctly from all those years ago. But when you decide where the record is going to be, where the song is going to be on the vinyl, on the record, where it's going to appear, sequencing an album is kind of tricky, because you're coming out of one song and you've got a certain tempo. And the way we would do it is you have the two tape machines up. You'd have the song that precedes Darling Nikki, let's say, and it's at a certain tempo, and I'd be standing at the tape machine with a grease pencil, and I'd watch his face for a cue, and he'd be kind of counting along 2, 3, 4, and he would nod his head, and I'd mark the tape with the grease pencil, because that's where he wants the next song on the record to come in. So you go ahead and you cut the tape, and you cut that next song there on the mark, and then you listen back to it. You play the tail of song A and you hear the head of song B. Sometimes the keys don't match up well. Sometimes you're going to a lower key, or you might be going to a slower tempo, and it can sound as though the record loses pressure there for a minute. So just like in a television show or in a movie, you can't really have two big scenes right next to each other. Your audience needs a little breather. So you need a segue piece that will help tie those two disparate scenes together. So that's when we would get creative with the tape machines, and we would do just these little segue pieces that would then the tail end of a song would go into the segue piece, and then the segue piece would fade into the head of the next song, and you make that transition a little bit more smoothly.
Well, that backmasking on the tail end of Darling Nikki, even when you, for those that obviously don't know, we have a lot of new Prince fans, but at the end you have this strange backmasked area. But even when you play it forward, it seems simple enough to just record something forward and then just flip it around on the recording. But every time I hear it, when it's flipped over, I hear something else that happening there that it's like it wasn't done that way. Here, here's a little sample of this for those who are curious about what it sounds like forward. Now, what's interesting about that to me is that even though that's the forward version of this, there's something about that just does not sound right. It's like the way that it was, it's like, I don't know if it's like was dragged, or maybe, like you put your fingers on the reel at that point to kind of make it have a weird, there's something else going on there that it's always drawn my attention to it. And I've always wondered if there was something weird happening with that process.
Yeah, that's a super slow flange, really, really slow flange, going back and forth between the left and right channels. You're hearing some phasing going on there and really deep modulation. So yeah, he loved those kinds of effects.
I can't even imagine just recording that forward, which just seems I can't even imagine what that process looks like. I mean, is it just him just layering his vocals over
Just
and over and over?
layering his vocals, and then in the mix stage, just running it through a flanger. It sounds like, I'm thinking it might have been, there's a device made by Lexicon called the PCM42, and you can do a flange on that. It's got a varispeed oscillator, and you can adjust the rate of that oscillator and the shape of the oscillator, and you can get that sound pretty easily on that Lexicon PCM42. He loved those things. I did too. So
yes,
yeah, that would have been one way to get that effect. And then you flip the tape upside down and do it backwards for the segue piece. But a lot of times, like on the song Starfish and Coffee, for example, you'd start with backwards drums, and then everything else would be put on in the forward direction. So on some of these pieces, some of it's backwards and some of it's forwards.
Yeah, and I imagine, were you part of the process of recording "Girl"?
Yeah, I seem to remember that I might have been, but
Because
maybe I wasn't. Maybe that
know this. We can look it up on print. Jeff Page, can you look up "Girl" on Prince Vault and see if because what's cool about
might have been, yeah.
If you play "Girl" backwards, it's a song called "Boy." And it's a vocal that is layered in the background, a female voice. I think was it Jill? I can't remember who it was.
It might have been Jill from that era. Yeah.
So yeah, she actually sings or talks a completely different song that's like really soft in the background when you're listening to it forward, but it just creates this really weird vibe.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember the song from early when I joined him, but I think maybe because we put the tape up, I don't think I recorded it. Yeah. I think it was before me.
Yeah.
Let's see what else would I for those that don't know, the song Electric Intercourse that was going to be on Purple Rain was actually dropped in exchange for Beautiful Ones, and I think also Moonbeam Levels was also flipped in there too. But how did you feel about that decision?
Oh, that live version of Electric Intercourse. I loved that so much.
Yeah.
I really loved it a lot. And of course, I love the Beautiful Ones. So you can only get, 34 minutes worth of music on an album. So something had to go. But I thought that was an outstanding vocal performance. I really loved it a lot.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I've seen a couple of people ask here about, I guess the more erotic stuff that may have been recorded. I think you had mentioned this. It was recorded around the same time as Purple Rain, but not released until years later. Weekend F.
Mhm.
Any studio adventures that you can share? Not necessarily about that recording, but I mean, obviously there's some stuff going on there with Jill Jones in the studio, if I remember the stories correctly. But there's also a bunch of crazy things that apparently, rumor wise, happened in the studio. Were you ever in a scenario where you're like, yeah, I'm just going to hit record. I'm going to go grab something to eat. You do you.
No, I'm glad you asked me that question. Never. Never. I did not that original recording of the song you mentioned, I did not participate in. I wasn't there, and boy, do I regret that because gosh, that original recording I thought was so powerful. I liked it so much. He redid it later on with a different attitude, and I think I was part of the redoing of it with the new horn line and everything, and he brought in George Clinton after I had already left, so, unfortunately, I wasn't part of that session, but yeah, they redid it, and for me, it was never as powerful as the original version. Prince, I can't emphasize this enough, was respectful. So, it may have been Peggy McCreary at Sunset Sound. I believe it was recorded at Sunset, so Peggy might have been there, but she probably would have been asked. I'm certain she would have been asked to leave the room. He, um he kept those things private. He kept them private, and he was respectful to people. You wouldn't go into his house and see pornography. You wouldn't. You wouldn't see Playboy magazine or nude pictures or things. He was a little bit prudish about those sorts of things, believe it or not. Do you remember the song from Crystal Ball? Well, the song Crystal Ball, there's a line in that song that says, while soldiers draw their swords of sorrow, my baby draws pictures of sex all over the walls in graphic detail. Sex.
Yeah, he's talking about Susanna.
Well, he was with Susanna at the time, and he had said okay to her doing a mural, drawing a mural on the wall of his den where the pool table was. It had these two nude nymphs like fairies, long, lean beings with really, they were female, but really flat chested, just nymphs with wings, sort of an angel like kind of thing. So that was his all over the walls in graphic detail. Sex. It was rated G.
Right.
It was that tame. If you're a writer, everything inspires you. So of course he used artistic license to exaggerate, but there might have been a little grain in there of feeling like, oh, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, on to Around the World in a Day. Funkatopia and Tanya D. Harris ask, if possible, can you explain what the meaning is behind Prince's lyric in Condition of the Heart, where he says, every day is yellow, I'm blinded by the daisies in your yard. She said, in the Sunset interview you did, you appeared to get a little emotional when discussing that song.
Just kills
So
me.
she's curious if there is a deeper meaning that we're not aware of. And also, why does he use the color yellow if he's sad? And when he uses blinded by, does he mean there's so much beauty you can't take it? I'll let you try to answer that cluster of questions about
Yeah.
art.
I'm gonna offer you just a guess because he didn't talk about it. It wouldn't be like Prince to say, well, here's what I was thinking. So I'm just gonna guess, and I do get choked up when I hear that song, because I think it was one of his most vulnerable moments on record, and he didn't like to be vulnerable on record. He liked to be powerful or sexy or desperate, but he didn't like to be vulnerable, and he was on that record, and I just loved it. I thought it was genius. So, Prince met Lisa Coleman in the late 70, 79, 80, something like that, and then later on, he met Wendy Melvoin. and right away hired her and put her in his band. And then he met Wendy's twin sister, Susanna Melvoin, and fell hard for her, really hard. So the three of them, Wendy, Lisa, and Susanna, Wendy and Susanna are twins, but they've known Lisa since they were in diapers. So the three of them were really, really tight. And they're from Los Angeles, where it's sunny and bright. So Prince, early in his career, spent a lot of time sleeping on their couch and just hanging out with these three young women. Wendy and Susanna are two of the most fun-loving, life-loving, funny, happy people you will ever want to meet. When you're with them, you laugh a lot. Stuff is always funny. Wendy's got a great sense of humor. Susanna shares that sense of humor. So when they were with Prince, he found himself in the midst of these three beautiful women, Wendy, Lisa, and Susanna, who laughed and were fun. Their world was yellow and bright and sunny with optimism. Prince was a kid who came from a rough childhood in North Minneapolis, where it's cold and gray and dreary. Wendy and Lisa and Susanna were from Southern California, where it's sunny and warm every day. He was spending a lot of time with Susanna as he was writing the songs for Around the World in a Day. And he was having some difficulty because she was with someone. She was with someone else, and she wasn't sure she wanted to break up with the guy that she was with. So Prince was having a hard time convincing her that she should be with him. So the lines when he says, every day's a yellow day, I'm blinded by the daisies in your yard. In her life, every day is a sunny yellow day. And he's a little bit blinded by that. It's hard to see who she is, what she wants, and whether or not they could be compatible. I'm blinded by the daisies in your yard. That's my best guess. I think he always struggled just a little bit. He wanted the sunshine and the light and laughter and love of Wendy, Lisa, and Susanna, but everyone has a dark side, and an artist has a dark side, and perhaps he worried that with his dark side, he couldn't do it. He couldn't make this last, which ultimately proved correct because they weren't able to stay together.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories with him and Susanna that yeah, I'm waiting for her book. All right, you got to tell me the story behind this. Obviously, the intro to America. Is there some story about why it was decided to be started that way? I mean, obviously, it's probably just, again, finger on the reels or whatever it is. Is there some type of reasoning for the decision, I guess, to create it intro like that?
Yeah, it's just fun. It's just something fun to do. So you can, yeah, if the tape machine, the multi-track tape machine is parked, you can disengage the brakes easily enough, and you can manually take the take-up reel and just spin it by hand. And so do that. And then the output of the tape machine is feeding the 1/2-inch stereo machine. So the stereo machine goes into record, and you put your hand on the reel for the multi-track, and you just spin it till you get a piece that you like, that sounds good to you. So there's a lot of trial and error. You know, you do it a few times and you get a piece that you like, and bammo, you've got that piece. Then you cut that into the master, the head of the actual mix of the song.
Yeah, and for those who wonder what it would sound like if that wasn't there, it would just been pretty much like a repeat of the intro, which is, it would just basically been the same part. So that's essentially what, but yeah, did he do it or did you do it? Did he?
I don't remember. I'm so sorry. I don't remember. Now, remember, forgive me, everyone. This was 35 years ago. And I had so little sleep. You know, as I said, that train moved really fast. So every day was bam, 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 bam. There's so much stuff happening. So I don't remember. Well, we would have had to, he would have asked for it. I knew how to achieve something like that. That's easily done. We would have set it up and then just done it. One of the other of us would have, it was probably him. He probably had his hand on the reel and was spinning it to get the effect he wanted.
All right. So I know we have a lot more questions, but the problem is that I want to be respectful of your time. And I know, it's getting late and everything. So I want to kind of touch on a couple of things regarding your book and also have it, tie into some of the Prince things. There was high expectations for Around the World in a Day coming off of that massive success of Purple Rain. I mean, it was so heavy in the experimental sounds and instrumentation, compared to some of the other stuff that was a little bit more straightforward, still inventive. But in your book, you discuss what is called the novelty popularity curve. Here is actually a picture of that from the book. And where do you feel that Around the World in a Day would fall on this curve?
What this curve is depicting is record sales on the y-axis there, and on the x-axis, on the far left-hand side, is the most familiar music. Music that is in the actual most familiar music would be lullabies and children's songs. Simple, simple music. And then on the right-hand side, the most novel or complex music would be music like free-form jazz, which is trying to be as unpredictable as possible. Neither children's records nor freeform jazz sell a lot to adults. So the music that most adults buy is pop music, the stuff on the pop charts. That's why it's got the big hump in the middle of that curve. So there are a lot of musics in other kinds of styles to the left or to the right of the center of the curve that don't sell as much as pop, but they have their fans. So on the left-hand side of the curve, you've got classic music. Classic music meaning classic forms like rock or disco or reggae or funk, the styles that we know really well. You know how this genre of music goes, and fans of these classic styles, when they buy new records, are listening for records that stay true to that classic style that they know and love. On the right-hand side of the bell curve is, I just put it in quotation marks there, but it's art music. It's music that isn't hewing to a familiar form, but rather is trying to reinvent forms and be innovative. So you started by saying there were great expectations for Around the World in a Day. Well, that's pretty unfair. Everything goes in cycles, and when an artist has just done a masterpiece, give a guy a break.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
The reality of the expectation. People are like, "Oh, what's coming next?"
Right. And this always happens. We often say about a hit record is that's an albatross around your neck. I don't know where that expression comes from, but wow. You have a hit record and then people expect you to do it again. Life doesn't really go like that. So he created a masterpiece, and then you want to flush out the system. And you want to push forward, and you want to ask yourself, all right, what's going to be my next trick? So you need a little breather. You need some time to kind of experiment with styles, to experiment with lyrical themes, to experiment with ways of writing and ways of considering your music, just to see what's going to work the best. So you've got what we would call in the business a transition record, where you're transitioning from one definitive style to whatever your next style is going to be. I happen to have a fondness for Around the World in a Day in particular, because as Prince was doing all this experimentation, figuring out what his next style was going to be, most of those recordings were done before Purple Rain was even released. So he still didn't know for sure how well Purple Rain was going to do. Once he knew for sure that he had achieved superstar status, I think his approach to music changed a little bit. So we get on the Parade album, you get an artist who seems to be more deliberately aware of having to having to contribute to his legacy and possibly, if he's got it in him, possibly do a second masterpiece. I mean, most artists don't even do one. So that's the big question after you've released something that's just been lauded as being great. Whether you're a film director or a painter or a television showrunner or whatever, what do you do next? It's really hard to follow that up. You need a little breather, and then maybe you'll release a second masterpiece. Anyway, Around the World in a Day, I would put on the right side of that bell curve. It was a transition record where he was experimenting a little bit to see what was going to work for him.
Yeah,
You know,
I
it's
would.
funny with all of that. It just seems to me like with the level of how he was producing music, that even after creating that masterpiece, Prince would have been one of those people that didn't go, now what? He just kept working. You know, the breather, the transitions, the moving on, that just came natural because when you're a conduit, when you're just letting things flow through you, your body knows what it wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me like those breaks and those changes, they didn't have to be planned. It would just happen.
Yeah. And remember now that at this point in his life, he's got a lot of money.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
he's thinking about things in the world, and he's thinking about how people behave, and he's thinking about the kind of world that he's going to live in with all this money. So you get songs like Pop Life. You get songs like America. He's kind of he's talking more about a larger world. You get the song Paisley Park. Now all of a sudden there's an us. So with Purple Rain, that was one man's vision, very much so. Despite the contribution from the revolution, which was huge, it was still Prince expressing himself. But on the Around the World in a Day, I think he was trying hard to express a sense of us. That's why the cover has so many people on the cover, and that's why he's writing about a place where all of us make this kind of music. All of us contribute to his art.
Yeah. Fast forwarding to, I regretfully want, I don't want to necessarily skip over Parade, but there's so much stuff, so many questions about Parade that I could ask. I mean, like for the question about why life could be so nice ends like it does. I was always curious as to why the decision was to just not only cut it right there, but also cut it mid-word. Like, that's another weird conscious decision that's just like an attention getter. It's just like you probably say, just for fun.
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly better than a fade out for something like that, and it's exciting, and it launches the next song. So it worked well in the sequence.
Right, which goes into, I think, Venus de Milo after that. Which
bring the tempo way down.
Yeah, sometimes it snows in April. Can you even listen to that song now?
It took a little minute after he passed away. It took a little minute for myself, and I certainly know Wendy and Lisa, all of us, to be able to get through that one without crying. It just was really, really hard. I'll never forget that session, though. That was really, really beautiful.
All right, so I want to ask you a couple more questions. So I've seen a few people ask this question about backwards drums on Starfish and Coffee. Does that I don't recall there being backwards drums on Starfish and Coffee. Maybe there is, but somebody says there's backwards drums on Starfish and Coffee.
Yeah, I don't remember now if it's just the snare, if it's the kick and snare. I haven't heard it in a long time, but the drum machine's pretty simple. You just a 1-bar loop is all you have to program, and you record 5 or 6 minutes of that on tape, flip the tape upside down, and just play it backwards. Because it's an even pattern, it's gonna work backwards as well as forwards. The idea behind that was to kind of set the tone for who this Cynthia Rose was, this young woman with developmental disabilities who Susanna went to school with. Susanna went to a really forward, liberal, experimental school, in high school, and when she was young in Southern California. Anyway, Cynthia Rose was developmentally delayed, and Cynthia would. You'd ask her, "What are you having for lunch?" And she'd say starfish and coffee. And the backwards drums were just sort of a tip of the hat to a different kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think the original thing that she said was starfish and pee-pee, I think is what this
Yeah, I seem to remember that. Yeah.
you know, and with Sign of the Times, you know, a couple more points here, and then we're gonna talk about the book and close it out. Prince decides he's moving on as far as Sign of the Times is concerned, you know, ultimately fires the revolution. You know, what do you're kind of in the studio here. You've kind of been friends with all these people and you know, now everything's just kind of changing and everything's flipping over. I mean, what was the vibe there at the time? I mean, you know, normally in a close work environment, you know, when someone gets fired, the workers kind of that are still there or, you know, trying to find, oh, hey, you hear what happened to Bobby? What happened
Yeah.
to Indy? I mean, you know, was there chatter? I mean, did you kind of, I mean, you had obviously established some close relationships with all the people that you work with. I mean, but what's the vibe? I mean, how are you even feeling like your own position is in jeopardy? I mean, what's the overall feeling about all that?
Actually, after the revolution broke up, that last year when I was with him, ironically, I think that's the closest we ever were. He gave me more responsibility than ever before, and we spent probably more, I want to say, quality time together, just
Mm.
being alone together. At that time, we're not there to be friends. We're not there to do anything other than work. And my job was always very clear. My role is to facilitate his recording. Whatever recording he needs done, that's what I have to help make happen. And I always took that very seriously. But the mood was very somber. He was not himself during a lot of that. He was quieter. He was more serious. He didn't laugh as much. He was more stern. He was trying out glasses, the song Wally. He was trying out a new look, and he didn't seem as happy. He didn't seem sad. He wasn't depressed, but he certainly seemed to have a lot on his mind, and he wasn't as happy as he had been. It was difficult for him to lose his band, just like it was difficult for the band members. That was a tough split. It's a tough split. And I've also written about the fact that at this time, his relationship with Susanna, their engagement is really coming unraveled. He's about to turn 30, and the style of music he makes now is not the popular kind, because now rap and hip hop are beginning to dominate the airwaves. And as it does in the music business, the public's appetite moves forward at a really fast clip. So here he is. Is he going to have a second masterpiece or not? And if so, will it be now? And another dilemma he's facing is he's got to write for a whole new band, because he's got to tour this record. And the performers he has on stage are not the same. That's not Mark Brown on bass. That's not Bobby Z on drums. That's not Wendy and Lisa on keys and guitars.
Right.
These are different players who have a different style of their own. So now he's got to arrange his music differently to suit and show off these players. So there were a lot of problems he needed to solve right around then. It blows my mind that in that pressure cooker, he was able to come up with what is considered to be a masterpiece, not just any old masterpiece, a double album.
Right. That's the biggest. And you did mention Wally, because I know Funkatopia and Susan Nancy Bethel, I hope I'm not pronouncing her name correctly. She actually had a question about that song that you had talked about was erased when he originally recorded it. And it was just re-released on the Super Deluxe. And I mean, it's assumed that it was re-recorded differently. Hearing the version that was released, though, do you feel like it was similar to what you heard, or was the one that he erased significantly different in vibe or tone? I mean,
yeah, the lyrics are the same. The basic melody is the same, but the vibe of it is different. So the original Wally was similar to Condition of the Heart, The Beautiful Ones, similar in the vulnerability. This is him expressing that, wow, that was a major blow, and that really hurt. This breakup really hurt. It was beautiful. It was gentle.
Mm.
It was sincere. It was sweet. It sounded like the Prince that I love the most, which is why I was so excited as a fan to hear it, because I thought, oh yeah, it's been a little while. You know, you've been doing the harder stuff. You've been doing Housequake. You've been doing all these dance things, and you did so many of the tracks that ended up on the Black Album. You've been doing all this hard funk stuff. Yes, please, more of this, more of these beautiful ballads. And then when we finished it, it was just the two of us at his home in Minneapolis, and he had me erase the tape. In fact, I don't think I even pressed the record button. He said, if you don't, I will. And he reached his hand over the remote for the tape machine. He put all the tracks in ready record, and I believe it was his finger that pressed the record button, but it was wiped out. The only thing that survived was a single cassette of that song. He made a cassette before he erased it. Anyway, when he ultimately decided, well, you know, it was a good song, let me redo it, he changed his approach to it. The re-recorded version of Wally has more braggadocio to it. It has more playfulness. He's kind of saying like, yeah, you know, she left me, but I'm fine. I'm good. I'm going to be fine. It's all good. Right. Yeah, okay, fine, good. Record producers know that when we're producing someone in the studio, we're considering the audience, and songs that a man listener might respond to might be different from a song that a woman would want to hear. And I can tell you, a woman would want to hear that original version of Wally. Yeah, but I think he did the new version for the guys.
You know, and what was the ultimate, and if this is too personal, just let me know, but what was the ultimate? I know that there was a little bit of a fiasco with the Black Album. I don't recall how much you worked on the Black Album. I know Bob George, you had your hands on, and some tracks on the Black Album, if I'm correct. But I know that there was some things that happened with the Black Album and the spiritual epiphany or induced whatever, that allowed him, that basically had him cancel that and go to Love Sexy. Was that the breaking point for you as far as stepping away? What was the crux that was like, okay, I think we're done here?
Yeah, I can tell you the chronology of that. All of the songs that appeared on the Black Album were songs that I recorded with him, except for one. I think I want to say I Wish You Heaven.
When to Her in Love?
Tour in Love, maybe. I don't remember the track listing on that, but I remember looking at the track listing when it finally did come out and realizing I've done all of them except for one.
Wow.
Anyway, and all of the songs that were on there that I had participated in were songs that were never intended for a Prince record. Most of them, like La Grind and Cindy C, those were records that we did really quickly, taking a break from Sign of the Times while we were in Los Angeles at Sunset Sound. We stopped work on Sign of the Times just to play around and record some songs that he could dance to at Sheila's birthday party. So he was renting out a club in Los Angeles. It may have been Flaming Colossus, it may have been Vertigo, but it was one of those LA clubs that he was renting out for Sheila's birthday party. And what you could do back in those analog days is you could take your half-inch stereo master tape down the street, down Sunset Boulevard, to Bernie Grundman Mastering, and Bernie would master an acetate for you. So you'd walk out of there with an acetate, with a record, 12-inch record. And give that record to a DJ at First Avenue or a club or anything. The DJ can play that record. So we did so many of these dance things just to have fun with. Prince liked to dance to his own music at Sheila's birthday party. So I left not too long after that. Well, I left in September or October of '87, and Sheila's birthday was in December. So yeah, it was a while afterward. Anyway, I left because I think we had both realized we reached the end of the line. I'll return to the story of the Black Album in a moment, but I'm going chronologically. So in June, I think it was, Paisley Park officially opened its doors. And when Paisley Park Studios opened its doors, now finally Prince could work at home differently than he had ever worked before. Instead of having just one engineer at a warehouse, he now has multiple studios, professional studios, with a staff of assistant engineers and people who can work with him. He's got a lot of different engineers to choose from. It doesn't have to be just the one person anymore. So he had reached a new way of working. And I had reached a point where it had been over 4 years and going on 5, and I hadn't seen my family or had any personal life to speak of. It was just time. It was time. And so we split. It was amiable, painful, but amiable. It was the right time for me and for him, I have to admit. Anyway, I learned later that he was disappointed with the reception, the critical reception for Sign of the Times. And in particular, there was some criticism that he wasn't Black enough. And his knee-jerk reaction was, I'll show you who's Black. Let me just take all these songs, all these funk things that I did, call it the Black Album, put it out there. Will you be happy with that? At the last minute, he realized, what am I doing? I'm Prince. I don't put reactionary albums out there in the world. I'm not reactive. I'm proactive. I'm an artist. I put out my art, not a reaction to someone's criticism of me. And he yanked it for good reason. I'm really glad he did that, because the records that those songs that appear on that album were not intended to be his best work, or not intended to be the statement he wanted to make for his next album.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that it was, you guys were able to walk away amicably. Did you follow his career afterwards? I mean, obviously you probably paid attention to some of the stuff that came out.
It was hard to. I remember, I think I was on the guest list. It might have been for a live show he did. Would have been maybe the Love Sexy tour or something. It was some time after I left. And I was working in the studio, so I got to the gig late, and I'm walking through this parking lot, walking toward this arena, and through the walls I can hear Prince music. And that was just too weird. That was just too weird to be walking through that parking lot, hearing Prince music and not being inside that building, because, of course, I'd been so heavily trained that when Prince music is playing, I better be working. It felt awkward and uncomfortable. I needed to establish my own career. I did get invited several occasions to come to Paisley Park Studios and do work, not invited by Prince, but clients would book me and they'd book Paisley Park to do mixing or things like that. So I did go back, and I saw him several times at Paisley while I was working there.
Any albums that he released after you that you really like?
Yeah, I think Musicology is perhaps my favorite. I like that one a lot. Yeah, but it was he was someone who I wish I could, but I wish I could listen to him and not have the memories, not have the associations. It's now impossible for me to listen to him and not remember so much. And that's, as I said earlier, that's not what I do when I listen to music. When I listen to music, I want to picture the performer in the studio. And that's complicated now when I listen to him.
Said that too. I think it was Hans Martin Buff, I think, said the same thing. He was like, I love him, but it's like, once you work for him for years, and it's just like, it makes it very difficult. It kind of puts this layer of, there's other things attached to it, emotional attachments that kind of cause the way, and that kind of lends itself to what you talk about in your book is how songs affect you, the things that it kind of kicks off. I
think it probably feels a little bit like going to your ex's wedding.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a happy occasion. This is great. And maybe the breakup needed to happen. You were okay with breaking up, but still, there's your ex up there getting married to somebody else. And yeah, it could be painful.
Yeah, I didn't know idea where to put this question. Funkatopia and Terry Orlando Jones wants to know if you remember who held your hand in silence for 10 seconds after the Boston Revolution show at the Wilbur Theater.
Give me a second.
Here's a hint. It was Terry Orlando Jones.
I remember. Yeah. Yeah. I do remember that.
Dr. Susan Rogers' new book. It's called "This Is What It Sounds Like." I've got it over here. Again, green screen is playing tricks on it. I think we have it that we can definitely put it up here and show you what the cover looks like. It's absolutely fantastic book. I love this thing. And as I said, what's really cool, if you want to, order the book, you can go to funkatopia.com/Susan. I made it very, very simple. Just funkatopia.com/Susan. You'll be able to see the cover of the book there and the link to the Amazon to purchase it for, either on Kindle or hardcover, which I got the hardcover because I like the physical.
Me too.
The book. So when I get to see you, I definitely want to get you an opportunity to sign it as well. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, with you now have a background in neuroscience that's based in music and I guess psychoacoustics. My question I have for you regarding this is, do you think now that you have with that you have a better appreciation for music, or would it be better if you were a musician, or is it, again, is it actually better that now that you have a scientific understanding of how songs are structured? I mean, who has the advantage, do you think?
Yeah, boy, in my fantasy mind, how I would love to be a musician. Gosh, I've envied that my whole life. I haven't pursued it because I don't think I am that. I think I'm musical, but I don't think I'm a musician. So yeah, musicians know something about music that I don't know, because they write it and they play it. However, knowing something about the neuroscience of music, there is no way that that's going to diminish the mystery and the joy of what music is. Any scientist knows the more you find out about a natural phenomenon, the more your mind is blown. So
yeah,
there's nothing more complex in the known world than the human brain. When you're studying the human brain, it's like looking into a cave that is so impossibly deep. Not only will you never get to the bottom of it, probably no one will ever get to the bottom of it. Certainly not in your lifetime, and probably not in the next generations either. It is so mysterious. So consider this, for example. Consider how a person can hear a record for the first time, fall instantly in love with it, like head over heels in love with it. The record makes them swoon. They love that record for life. They play it for other musicians or other listeners rather, and the other listener says, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
How does that happen? Why does it happen?
Did you ever consider what the phenomenon is? Have you ever seen, I'm sure you have, Bobby McFerrin and his clip that he does with pentatonic scale? It's part of the science thing. It's like a minute and a half. Well, it's by a couple minutes video, but it's so intriguing. I don't even know if I have it, but it's so intriguing because of the fact that the pentatonic scale is one of these things that is it's like an unexplained phenomenon.
Expectations.
Hold on a second. Watch this.
Ba, ba. Ba,
What was that skip?
ba, ba. Okay.
I think the video is skipping a little bit, and but I think you kind of get the idea. Is that he kind of introduces the audience to a tone, and then when he jumps to another location, it does another tone, and then without guiding them, he almost goes through the whole pentatonic scale, and the crowd follows along. Most of them not musicians, most of them in they and one of the things that he mentions on this is that no matter where he goes, no matter what level of musicianship that anybody has, it's like the pentatonic scale is something that is ingrained in people, that he can go and to kids that have no background in music and musical knowledge, and do that exercise with the ba 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 ba, and they get it no matter where he goes. So that part of that's what intrigued me about your book is hoping that you would kind of touch on some of those mysteries of those things that how can it be? How can it be that somebody is familiar with something like that without any training, without any musical background? It's just staggering to me that that's a thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. It's pretty cute to consider when you're a fetus, and you're in the womb, in the final trimester, it's muffled, but you hear mom's voice. You hear that heartbeat.
Mm.
Mostly you're hearing mom's voice. You're hearing that melody. And then you're born, and your caregivers are using their voices to calm you down. And they speak a certain way when they want you to calm down. And they speak a different way when they want you to kind of wake up and get out of your pajamas because we're going to grandma's house. And their voices get a little bit more excited. And the melodies go a little bit differently when they're trying to get you to be engaged. When they're reprimanding you, they use a different tone of voice. When they're warning you, they're using another tone of voice. So pitch and amplitude and duration, we're learning all of that from a very early age, how the melodies and the rhythms of our voices convey emotion. So in the human brain, language for most of us is on that left hemisphere, and then there's a homologous, a similar structure over there on the right hemisphere for most of us. In some left-handed people, that's swapped, but we all have these two hemispheres where speech is processed in one and melody, pitch, is processed in the other. So when you're listening to a record, you can focus on just the words, or you can focus on just the melody. We all know melody because we know how the human voice is used to convey not just information, but feelings. People's voices and how they use their voices, their speech prosody and their cadences tell us what's going on with them. An interesting thing is that the melodies the compositions created by French composers sounds like the French language. The music composed by Vietnamese composers sounds like the Vietnamese language. This has been shown in the laboratory. You can take unknown composers of classical instrumental music, play it for participants in the lab, and they can accurately guess the native language of that composer in many, many cases, because German music sounds German, English music sounds English, and so on. So when Bobby McFerrin goes around the world and he's getting listeners to join in with him in the pentatonic scale, this is something we all know innately. Even if we've never studied music, we know musical intervals. The musical intervals of our culture we know best, but Western music has gone all over the world now. It's the lingua franca of world music. So pretty much anybody in the world today knows about the Western tonal scale.
Why did you decide to become a professor of psychoacoustics? I imagine that all your work as an engineer was paying the bills, but what made you decide, hey, this is what I want to do?
It was the same thing that happened when I was a kid and I felt the calling to make records. In my late 30s, I felt the calling to want to be a scientist. It just felt like, I think I would really like that. And the more I got into it and started reading some science books, the more I think, oh, I want that so badly. And then all I needed to have happen was I needed a hit record. Back in the days before Napster, when you actually bought records, if you had a hit record as a producer and you had royalties on that record, you got a nice six-figure paycheck, and then 6 months later you'd get another one. Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had a hit record with Bare Naked Ladies, and I had the money. I could afford it to leave the music business, do 8 straight years of college, and get this PhD. And I'm happy to say, I thought I would love it, and I do.
Yeah,
I
that's awesome.
I love it
Yeah, it
tremendously.
is.
Yeah, it's when you feel like you gravitate towards things. All right, so just two more questions. One, Jeff Page, you had questions about frequencies.
Yes, actually, I wanted to talk about. Now, there's a bazillion opinions on frequencies and music, and even more opinions on how they affect people,
Mm.
especially when we're talking about the tuning of 432 hertz and 440 hertz. I mean, that's the biggest argument and debate that there is out there with frequencies, and we know there's a bunch of frequencies. I find many hardcore musicians say there's no difference; it doesn't do anything. And then, of course, there's many others that say it does. And there was an article that I read um, where you told Reuters that there's no empirical research suggesting that the universe has a preferred acoustic frequency. So my thing, well, at least that's what the article said. It was
Yeah.
your quote. But what I was curious of is, have you found that these frequencies, whether something's 432 versus 440, do affect people, and so at least because of their vibration resonation, have you found a difference in how people are affected, never mind the universe itself?
Uh, no. um, I don't think a lot of listeners today are aware of how often records are very sped. By that meaning sped up or slowed down in the mastering process to get that groove to be right where you want it to be. So many of the records I made with Prince are not tuned to A440, and it had nothing to do with the frequencies or any sort of analysis. It had to do with when we were in mastering, you sometimes think, you know what? This might sound better if we bumped it up a little bit. It might sound more energetic. So you speed it up a little bit. And now your A is no longer vibrating at 440 hertz. It might be 441 or 442 or something. You sped it up. Other times you might slow it down just a little bit. People put, I think, too much stock in the idea that frequency is special. Our whole world is vibrating. All the colors we see are frequencies. All the sounds we hear are frequencies. I don't know of any evidence that says that the human brain treats 440 any differently than it treats 432. Now, what is factually demonstrated is that certain musical instruments sound better in certain ranges, certain concert halls. This is a cool thing. Some concert halls actually sound best when music in a certain key is played in them. In other words, some of the great concert halls in Europe were designed for pieces that were in the key of C or pieces in the key of D from the resonance of the hall. So certainly there's compatibility between the acoustic world and the vibrations that vibrating things are making and how they sound to us. But I think there's no reason to think that we'd have peace in our time if we all decided to tune to A432 instead of A440. We've actually been doing that for a long time, and we don't have peace yet.
Right.
And that kind of segues to my question, which would kind of be the last question that I had was for you. So you're like, yay. And I've been dying to ask you about binaural beats. And obviously, for those not familiar with binaural beats, there are frequencies, alpha, beta, zeta, whatever. And I know it may lend itself a little bit to what we were just talking about, but I think binaural is a little bit different. There's like certain tonals, like I know the Time did this a lot, where like was our here's a sample of the Time doing it, and you hear it a lot on the Time songs. Listen to the keyboard. This.
You wonder how to do it.
Just that one droning.
I'm just cool.
This and they did this a lot in their songs, where there's like one droning key that's like kind of. I know it's like it's obviously it sounds cool with everything, but I lends myself to believe there's something else going on tonally, that it's whether intentional or not. But what is your feelings on and I don't want to insult binaural beats, but I mean due to your research, I mean, what is your thoughts on binaural beats and its ability ability to be able to affect you, to break bad habits, to sleep better, to, diet better, to do all these things. What are your thoughts on
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about some of the research. There's not much research done on it, but I can tell you a little bit about what I've learned. So binaural beating refers to slow wave amplitude modulations below 15 hertz or so. Now, humans can only hear frequencies as low as 20 hertz, but below that, we can't hear 15 hertz. We can't hear 10 hertz or 4 hertz. We don't hear it, we feel it. So the way you get someone to perceive binaural beats is when you put, let's say, for example, they've got headphones on, and in one ear you feed the frequency of, let's say it's 100 hertz, and in the other ear you feed the frequency of 104 hertz. So you're hearing a 4 hertz difference between the two ears. You're going to be experiencing these slow wave 4 hertz binaural beats that you do not hear, you feel it. And it makes most people feel kind of seasick. It's kind of aversive. People don't like it. We don't like beating because it doesn't feel good necessarily. Piano tuners are experts at listening for beats. So in most piano notes, the little hammer comes down and it hits. There's 3 vibrating strings, and those strings have to be really well tuned, because if they're off by a few hertz, you're going to hear beating. We don't like beating, and that's why we tune our pianos so that we don't hear beat frequencies. But that's what binaural beating is. It refers to the difference between your left and right ear in these slow wave amplitude variations. Now, I say that most people find them aversive and don't like them. There is one study that I know of, Beauchamp, I think was the author, came out about 5 or 6 years ago, and it tested binaural beats and depression. And it turned out that most people did not like listening, pardon me, to binaural beats. However, people who were depressed and or anxious, if I'm recalling correctly, actually got a little bit of relief from their depression or their anxiety temporarily for a little while, thanks to these binaural beats. But my thinking is that the reason their depression went away is because the binaural beats were even worse.
Okay,
They're like, oh God, I thought I was sad before. I guess I'm not so bad after all. I don't have to listen to this. Yeah, binaural beats do not feel good to listen to. Now, you mentioned delta, theta, alpha, beta waves, gamma waves as well. What that refers to is our nervous system and the different frequencies at which our nervous system can oscillate throughout the day and throughout the night. If your nervous system, it's got some central structures up there, and if your nervous system is pinging at a rate of about 1 or 2 hertz, or a rate of a little faster than that, that's the delta rhythm. A little faster than that, around 4 hertz, is the theta rhythm. Those are common when we're asleep. So when you're unconscious, your nervous system is oscillating at that really slow frequency. When you wake up, or just before you fall asleep, you're in an alpha state. And that frequency is generally between 8 hertz and 13 hertz. You're in an alpha state, and that feels good because you're all relaxed. But when you wake up in the morning, you need to get from that alpha state up to the next state, which is the beta state. That's 15 to 30 hertz. And that's when your nervous system is, come on, you're getting ready for work. You're awake, you're moving, you're having your coffee. You're not racing through your day. You're feeling good. Turns out music listening is really effective to get us into that feel-good beta rhythm. Music wakes us up when we're sleepy, and if you go higher than the beta frequency, you're in the gamma frequency, which is very broad and very fast. That's when you're thinking and you're working and your nervous system is racing. Music is really good at bringing you back down from that racing state into that beta state that feels good. This has been shown in the laboratory. So music listening is good for getting us into that beta band activity of 15 to 30 hertz. It does not mean that listening to 15 to 30 hertz will entrain your nervous system to sync up with it. It doesn't work like that. You can listen to Prince at 105 beats per minute, and you'll be good. You'll be in that beta state. You don't need to do binaural beats.
Well, yeah,
I'll,
I think
I'll,
that's what were you gonna say, Jeff?
I'll never have to worry about the binaural
I,
beats scenario because I'm deaf in one ear anyway, so
Oh, really?
it's not an issue for me.
So was Brian Wilson, the great Brian Wilson.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll stay depressed.
You ought to listen to a couple of quick notes. Again, pick up this book, please. I'm going to put up another a picture of this book. Before you go, is there any way we could get a bumper from you? We obviously have the online radio station. I would love to have a bumper. You saying, "This is Susan Rogers, and you're listening to Funkatopia."
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. Anytime you're ready.
This is Susan Rogers, and you're listening to Funkatopia.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Yes.
Again, this book here is absolutely fantastic. It is, and I'm going to put the picture up again because I know the green screen is messing with it, but it's Susan's brand new book. This is What It Sounds Like. That is not from This Is What It Feels Like. It's from When Doves Cry. It's called This Is What It Sounds Like, What the Music You Love Says About You. And if you really are interested in all the music that you've listened to all your childhood and the ways that it's made you feel and some of the background information on how music affects you, this book is unfriggin' real. And there was a bunch of specific questions that we had to go, but I it is what it is. I want to, again, be respectful of the time. And it has been an absolute positive honor to have you on. I mean, I did want to say a real quick shout out though. I want to give you a shout out for talking about the movie Koyaanisqatsi in this book.
Oh, love that movie.
Philip Glass. Something intrigued me about this movie back, and I did a mother-son date back with my mother in the 80s, and I took her to go see this movie, and I didn't really know what it was about, but something about it intrigued me. And after the movie was over, I was like, I didn't know what it was about, Mom, but it was interesting for sure. We both were just sitting there watching this movie that didn't seemingly have any plot. It was a story, about destruction and everything else. But when you mentioned that, I literally stopped in my tracks. I said, I haven't thought about that movie. But again, what an amazing, amazing book. I can't thank you enough. Again, new book out now. This Is What It Sounds Like. The link to purchase it, you can go to funkatopia.com/Susan. And if you happen to be listening to this broadcast in your car and the simple audio version of this, just go to funkatopia.com/Susan and you can get the Amazon link there. Again, I cannot thank you enough for being so forthright on some of these questions. I hope we asked you some questions you haven't been asked before.
Yeah. And we'll have to have a part 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me on and telling people about the book and letting me answer Prince questions. It warms my heart that so many people love him. It's and are interested in him musically. He deserves that. He's truly extraordinary.
Yeah, somebody was asking, where is she teaching? She is right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, the professor of psychoacoustics at Berkeley right now, correct? Is that
so I've just retired. I'm semi-retired now, so I no longer teach at Berkeley on campus in Boston, but I still teach for Berkeley online. And I'm teaching a psychoacoustics course for Berkeley Online, and I'm writing a new course for Berkeley Online that will be titled Music and Neuroscience. So that'll be coming up, and I'll be teaching that. Yeah.
And so I'm posting all these great comments for all these people that are so just everybody just loves it. Yeah, please pick up this book. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Susan Rogers, for joining us tonight and being so patient and gracious with your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really nice talking with you guys, and I hope you have great success with the program and in your lives.
Well, again thank you so much, and I can't wait to get your feedback on that Todd Rundgren song.
Oh yeah, I listened to that Todd Rundgren song. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so So that was Susan Rogers. Man, what a night of and you know what's amazing is that we probably only got through about 70% of the questions
Yeah,
because it just kind of
absolutely.
got to the point. I was not aware of how detailed some of her answers were going to be and how gracious that she was in the time. But man,
Yeah, it was
yes,
great.
yeah, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe to us so that when we do these interviews, you can be aware of when these are happening. And please, if you're on Facebook, please click follow. We are right here at the border. We're about to cross over 23,000 followers on Facebook. So thank you guys so much, which is just friggin' amazing. This is one of these interviews that's going to have to be chopped up for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
There's so much gold in it. There's
oh my
so many
gosh.
gold nuggets. I mean, that's yeah.
Yeah, especially the vocal chain and the guitar chain question.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I mean, because people who have been trying to chase that sound, she literally told you everything that he used, and if you don't have that or you can't afford it, an alternate to use, gave you everything. It's just all there, man. What an amazing night. Nothing on the books for next week, so we're probably going to take a break. Because we've kind of just been hammering at it for week after week here. So, and we got a bunch of personal stuff going on and whatnot, but it has been, if we didn't get to your question, I am so sorry. Again, we only got through about 70% of what we had intended, and we've already gone 3 hours. So
That's right.
it was a very, very, very long night, and well worth it because, man, the information was just ridiculous. And so, if you missed any part of this and you want to check it out, you can tune in tomorrow, and you can check it out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Apple Music, wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll make sure that it's out there tomorrow so that you can check it out. And
SoundClouds.
yes, SoundCloud. Yeah, SoundCloud.
Yeah, all over.
Everywhere. So wherever you listen, Stitcher, wherever. So
it doesn't matter wherever you listen.
It doesn't matter. If you go to everybody will say, "Wait, you're on iHeartRadio?" Yes, we're on iHeartRadio. Wait, I thought all the radio stations on Odyssey. You're on Odyssey too? Yep, I'm on that now. You're on Apple Music. You're on Spotify. Yes. So just go to wherever you listen to that stuff and just search for Funkatopia Live, and you'll be able to find us and check it out there. And again, please remember to support us. You can join us at patreon.com/Funkatopia if you want some unedited files and whatnot, and all kinds of really, really cool stuff. You can also do one-time donations on Venmo and Cash App, $ Funkatopia on Cash App, @Funkatopia. It's all good. We need plenty of support because we have the online radio station and also the Funked Up app, which you can download for on your iPhone and also in Google Play for Android. Just search for Funked Up, FUNKEDUP, Funked Up, and you'll be able to download a ASCAP licensed radio station. 2 radio stations, actually. One that's 24/7 funk. It does all the old school classics like the Ohio Players and Parliament Funkadelic and Earth, Wind and Fire, and of course Prince, and new stuff too, New Master Sounds, Lettuce, all those great funk bands. And we also have a 24/7 Prince radio station called Purple Yoda Radio. You just download the app and you can access both of those radio stations for free. And yes, it is ASCAP licensed, which is one of the reasons why we ask for your support, because
radio.
ASCAP licensing is not cheap, just so we're clear. So make sure that you, just check it out. And absolutely, we love all your support and continued love, and all your kind comments are seeing all this stuff. And yes, love to get Wendy and Lisa on the show. I'm watching it.
Absolutely. That'd be it.
Yes, because I love me some Wendy and Lisa, and I will have all the CDs and everything just all up this desk. Because I am like obsessed with Wendy and Lisa. I just think that they're masterminds and geniuses, and love to have.
I love Wendy and Lisa. I always joke with a buddy of mine about when "Are You My Baby" came out, and actually Terry Orlando Jones, who you asked
Mhm.
his questions,
Yeah.
he used to play with me in Boston. He's my drummer, and it was the same thing. One day he came over and we started jamming, and I started playing "Ooh, Are You My Baby," and we just, I think we played that for the rest of the night.
Oh man, that "Are You My Baby" is like bam, 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 bam. It's like it's just I don't understand how that album
Yeah,
didn't explode. It didn't make any sense to me because there was so many great albums in that period, but that was definitely one of them. Maggie's Dream was another one. That was another
hmm
great album that nobody paid attention to. Wendy and Lisa, that album, all the first three albums was just like,
great. Yeah,
what
amazing. Like,
are you talking about? I don't even. I mean, not the Girl Brothers and the other one.
right.
They're all great, but I just don't. I just don't understand the marketing and how people just. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone. Get some sleep. We're going to make sure that we get this out to you ASAP. Good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to a Funkatopia Live, and we will talk to you at some point. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, let me turn the radio station back over to you guys, you fine folks. All right, here you go, radio station listeners. Your music is back on. All right, everybody. Good night.